Well, greetings everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Breakfast Club Jamboree. To start off with, obviously, it's just me and my friend Rob, DevShell, to remember. And I know we've already spoken a little bit about it before the show, but please explain why a DevShell to remember.
Oh, well, it's kind of a play on a band. There's a day to remember. And today is the 10th anniversary of Peach and I becoming a couple. Not when we met, but when we became a couple. It's our anniversary today. So 10 years.
And that's really cool. And now you guys have two kids together, one of which was just born like less than 2 weeks ago, huh?
Well, more than 2 weeks. I mean, he's a month and a half old now. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. It seems to me like yesterday, and that's just shows how time flies. Wow.
Yeah. It's part of getting older too. I mean, it's going fast for me too. The older you get, the faster time goes.
Yeah, when I was young, I used to think of everything in metaphysical terms. I used to think of age as a weight, like that it fights against gravity. And the more that you accrue, the faster you move down. You know, the heavier you get, the older you get, the heavier you get, the faster you get down. And sooner or later, gravity claims us all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a saying, time is relative. And it wasn't like a long time ago. It wasn't like it was just yesterday, but a few years ago, I really realized what that means. Exactly what that means. If your entire world experience is 10 years, a year is 10% of that. That's a long time.
Yeah.
But if your world experience is 50 years, a year is ain't shit. A year goes by quick. So yeah, time is relative. And yeah, the older you get, the faster it goes. And Joe's birthday is coming up, and we're discussing that.
Hey, how's it going there, Rob? How's it going, Paul?
When is your birthday, Joe?
Next Saturday.
Next Saturday. Oh, is that Halloween? Yeah, that's right. It is. Yeah. Now it's all coming back to me. I did know this before, or it has been mentioned. Yeah. But yeah. Wow. Okay. So dress up on your birthday for next week's show, because I do believe that's the rule. I think Sister Danger expects us all to dress up. So I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do. I'm just here on the mountain, so I don't have any costumes as such, and I don't really know. Maybe I'll just go in drag and be a girl.
I was thinking about it myself just now, but I don't have a wig.
Yeah.
Well, women have short haircuts too.
Well, I mean, my most recent haircut, which was a few weeks ago, I told them I wanted a unisex cut, and they were like, "Well, considering how short it is, the best thing we can do is to soften the part. You have a hard part, so soften the part on the side, and I said, okay. So it's just kind of,
I have fond memories of haircuts.
Yeah. I will be 52.
Whew.
I also have memories of getting a haircut and going, "Oh my God, look what you've done to me!" So back in
Phoenix Writer. Not to cut you off, Paul. Phoenix Writer says, "Happy anniversary, Dev and Peach. Thank you. Such a sweet couple. That double thank you. I remember when you first started making vids, Dev. I thought to myself, what a handsome fellow." Well, thank you very much. I remember when Peach came into our lives. I like that. And you thought that she was such a peach. She is a peach. That's pretty good. Thank you.
Yeah. I second all of those sentiments that Phoenix Writer just expressed as well. At the time when you guys first got together, it was a bit of a drama. But, that didn't last. How long did that actually last for you in terms of where you felt comfortable? What, more than a year?
Yeah, more than a long time. It was bad.
Oh, wow.
It was really bad. And it was 2 years later, and there were still people leaving comments on my videos. I mean, not a lot, but there were still people leaving comments on my videos saying how much of a piece of shit I was for stealing Richard's girl. And I'm a terrible friend and blah, blah, blah. And it got to the point where he had to say something, where Richard had to come out and say, would you guys just knock it the fuck off already? It's just a couple of years old. This is over. This is done. We've all moved on. We're all good. We all talk. Get the fuck over it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and actually, the drama is actually how I met Rob, because there was all this drama. I liked Peach before that, and then there was all this drama, and everyone's hating on Rob. And I've always been the type of person that, well, if there's a big hate machine going on, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look into it myself and try to, avoid, getting influenced by the hate machine and see, what it's really all about. And I started watching his videos, and I was like, hey, this guy's pretty cool. Hey, he lives in New Jersey. And we went from there. And then I started showing up to his Blog TV things, and many years later, here we are.
Part of the New Jersey contingent, as Zonstar always said. So.
Yep.
It was me.
I first met Rob back in the day. I accidentally started making videos where people said "fuck you" to me, and it became just kind of a fun little bandwagon that lasted for a couple of weeks. And I got like 150 or so different video responses, and one of them was from Rob telling me "fuck you."
I made one of those.
Yeah, I think everybody did one of those. Everybody who was anybody almost did one of those back in the day. It was a thing. Yeah.
Those days I really miss those days. I mean, there really was a sense of community. And yeah, we had differences. It wasn't until later that people started tearing it. I mean, yeah, we had drama and all that, but it wasn't until later that things really fractured and got really, really horrible.
Nostalgia is always like really fond, isn't it? But I think back, I think about what atheists put Ben and Fang X through, for example. Don't get me wrong, that guy's a royal prick, right? But on the other hand, I don't think you can describe what happened to him as anything other than internet.
To who?
Ben and Fang X.
Oh, Ben and Fang X. Yeah, there was definitely some of that. He did, to be fair, he threw out quite a bit of his own.
Absolutely. But I mean, at the same time, I mean, a lot of people built their channels around poning Venom Fang X.
There was a couple that I felt bad for, but like Venom Fang X, I never felt bad for him. Not completely. I did notice though that in the heyday of it and in the heat of it, I thought this guy, whatever he decides to do with his life, whenever he gets his shit together, he's going to be a success no matter what he does. He's a brilliant guy. He's talented. He's a salesman. But the video of him dragging the Christmas tree, I thought was one of the saddest videos on YouTube. I was like,
I don't think I ever saw that one.
Do you remember that?
On the other hand, and almost in defense of Venom Fang X, I mean, his Joker video, I personally thought it was amazing.
Yeah.
Although I've talked to people who thought it was a little bit too disturbing because he was clearly unhinged when he made it. I mean, he let himself so far into the character. It was kind of, it was. I like that, but
Yeah, well, so did I. I mean, actually, it's funny because like probably once a year I go and look for it, a mirror of it and watch it again. And I think people say, oh, he was out of his mind. I don't think so. He was playing a character, and he did a good job of playing a character.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a really good video. I thought it was brilliant. I mean, everybody thought it was brilliant. That's why they kept playing clips of it. It was just like, yeah, they wanted to go after him, but they also wanted to showcase, hey, look at this guy. This is fantastic. I mean, I think even Thunderfoot, remarked when he did his response to it, like, this is fantastic.
Do you guys remember? There was a young woman who used to spout off about Jesus and pretend she was having orgasms while she did it. I can't remember her name.
No.
No.
No, okay.
I remember that.
Yeah,
I did a little piss take of her, and also Woods of Jordan's dad, Pastor, whatever his name was. Yeah, because they were talking about come to Jesus, and then she'd be like, oh Jesus, come. Hilarious, man, really funny. Yeah, I might have to look that video up and post it on Twitter just for nostalgia's sake.
She took come to Jesus literally.
Yeah,
come to Jesus. That's the name of the video. Come to Jesus. Come with a U, of course.
There was with regard to Venom Fang X Joker video. At the time when that video was out, I had not seen The Dark Knight. And then once I finally did, and then I go back and watch the video, it's like, oh no, he did a really good. Then he's even better. Like, wow, he folded in various dialogue from the movie, and oh yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, there was one video, it was a Christmas video he had done, where I think during the video, there was a lot of silent time, there was a lot of quiet time, but he talked about like what atheists do on Christmas and blah, 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 blah. And there was another one that Thunderfoot did a response to, where Thunderfoot used clips of his videos, of his video with the Christmas tree to highlight how Thunderfoot has a life with family and friends, and he has a full life and he can enjoy the holidays without God, while Sean, Venom Fang X, on the other hand, is alone. You know, it's like so much for the holidays. But yeah, that's the video is he's Sean is dragging a Christmas tree that he had just cut. He's dragging it behind him through the snow. And it's actually, it wasn't meant to be, but it's actually really sad. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably the only time I felt badly for him. So
I'll have to see if I can track that one down.
You know, it's interesting though how now there's not, I mean, since there's not that sense, quite the sense of community that there used to be, and there haven't even been very many religious people making videos on YouTube at all, stating their views. I mean, the only person you really hear about anymore is G-Man.
I watched a video recently. It's one of those music react channels where it's typically like two black guys listening to heavy metal, and like, oh my God, this is good. Anyway, in the comments, I saw a comment left just like 2 weeks ago by Jesus Freak 777, and I was like, oh, I know that dude.
Yeah. Well, I remember when Jesus Freak had made a video. It was about the whole Binding of Isaac thing, and basically saying that he hopes that if God told him to kill his child, that he would have the strength to do it because God told him to. And I can't remember the guy's name. He was a Canadian guy, glasses, and he had
Superfly.
Yeah, was that Superfly?
It's the Superfly.
Yes, yeah, and did a video and basically like, I'm calling Child Protective Services because this guy is out there, And now I think that, in reality, I don't think Jesus Freak actually would, but it was disturbing that he was like, man, I wish that if God told me, that I would actually do it. I'm like, dude.
Yeah, but that's from the same guy, Joe, that said biblical slavery and American slavery was different. And biblical slavery was like, okay, back then they treated their slaves properly. And so, we shouldn't think of it as such a bad thing that there's slavery in the Bible, because it's not the same as what it was in the, early American history.
True. Yeah.
It's not the same. I'll grant that. But I mean, slavery was just, we conquered your village. Now you're all belonging to us. That's how it used to work.
Right.
While it's true that slavery is slavery, and it doesn't matter who did it and when and where and everything else, it was slavery.
Of course, that's my point.
Yeah, the American slave trade, though, was a particular kind of cruel that surpassed a lot of the others. I mean, it's hard, and I'm not saying you're arguing that it's not, but I'm just saying that it would be hard to argue that it wasn't. The American slave trade was vicious.
Although the same passages in the Bible that condone slavery were used to justify the American slave trade, but actually that was one thing I was talking to Tracy Harris. We were messaging back and forth, and I was telling her about something that a lot of people don't realize, that the importation of slaves was actually banned in like 1819 or 1821 or something like that, somewhere around there. But the practice, you can continue to own slaves. But since you couldn't import new ones, if you wanted to be in the slave trade, the only way to do it was to make more. And very often, rather than getting your slaves to copulate, you do the act yourself. And so think about that. The people were actually raping their slaves so that they could sell their own children into to other people. And like when Tracy realized that, she was like, holy crap. I mean, she had never thought of it that way. Like, yeah, they're literally selling their own children.
And hence the American slave trade being a particular kind of vicious. Yeah. It was nasty. It was nasty. I mean, here we are now, 150 years, later, and we're still cleaning that fucking mess up.
Yeah.
Probably always will be.
Well, right. That's right. Because basically there are people who continue to say, well, I wasn't alive. I had nothing to do with it. So therefore we should just shut up about it. Of course, they're the same ones who fly Confederate flags, but
this is a really good place to enter this part into the discussion. And Kazoom, what were you going to say real quick?
I was just going to say, I mean, saying that there's a difference between someone saying they should shut up about it, which is that's ridiculous. But there are some people who are saying, well, I shouldn't feel guilty for things that people that
you shouldn't.
Yeah.
See, the thing is, you shouldn't feel guilty because you had no hand in it. The thing is that people do benefit from the result of it. So, and that's really, like in my case, that's all I really want people to recognize, is that people. And I saw talking about somebody about this yesterday, that people will say, well, how come black people didn't come up after slavery? It's like, well, that's to say that is to ignore Jim Crow, is to ignore the black codes. It was illegal in some states to teach a black person to read. So of course we didn't come up. It wasn't like we just didn't come up. We were actually held back and continue to be held back. Not as much as before, but still.
This is a really good place to enter into the conversation. Something that, quite surprisingly, now that I ponder on it, I don't think we've ever discussed on the Breakfast Club, either in the Jamborees or previous to the Jamborees. And that's the issue of reparations. Can there be such a thing as reparations? How would you administer that? Who would qualify? Who wouldn't qualify? Go.
Yes, it does get complicated. Although it's funny, she was probably the one Democratic candidate that I would not have voted for if they were the nominee. But she actually was the only one who actually had the proper thing to say about reparations. And basically, her thing is, it's not even like, oh, well, it was a crime from back then, and how do you redress? It's a crime that's still going on. We're still seeing the effects of it, and there's still to a degree things going on now. So her point was that whatever any of us have is a function of where we were on that ladder, as far as because society has always been stratified, and one of the things that's one of the ways that slavery was able to persist was basically you had this multi-tier system. So like you'll hear people, particularly of Irish descent, will talk about being indentured, how they had ancestors who were indentured servants. Although that's still a contractual thing, you still had rights under the law, and you would eventually get out of it, assuming you survived. Not that it was a good situation, but it was not the equivalent. So basically, you had this strata where you could keep a lot of poor whites subjugated by having a layer of people below them that they could look down at.
Okay, Tommy from the Bronx says that there are reparations. It's called welfare. I just want to point out that most of the people on welfare are white.
Bingo.
The majority of people who are collecting welfare or on some kind of social assistance, the majority are white. So
one thing that I've given an awful lot of thought to the idea of reparations, and generally speaking, I like it as a concept. But what really vexes me, my friends, is exactly how far down the chain do reparations go? Hang on, Rob, let me finish. How far down the chain do they go insofar as, like, see, let's just say that you immigrated to America in the last 50 years, but you're still black. You're facing the same discrimination as people who were descended from slaves. But should you get reparations as well, even though you didn't descend from the slaves? There are problems like that. That's one example. How many black ancestors do you have to have to qualify? Who gets to decide that? That's another example. There's lots of really hard questions that I don't really know any answers to.
So reparations in the form of like a check, like a cash payment, I think is unworkable. I personally think that's ridiculous, because it would be very hard to parse out who would be eligible and who isn't, and that it gets crazy. But investing in like black enterprise zones, and expanding some existing ones, I think that's something that could work. I think investing in black colleges more, and in black trade schools and those kinds of things would work. I think
loan guarantees for business.
Yeah, loan guarantees for businesses. There's also certain things that can be done with communities that had dealt with redlining for a real long time, to help make some of those people whole. I mean, there's all kinds of things that some people might not consider to be reparations, but I think that that's some of the best that we can do at this point, and it would hopefully help to level the playing field. So,
yeah, I mean, I guess I think it'd probably be a combination of those things. I think, and as far as parsing it out, I mean, certainly, like you said, if somebody came here later, that maybe their ancestors were not slaves, but they still faced all, the redlining, they still faced, job discrimination, they had housing discrimination. And I think Rob has some good ideas. I'm not opposed to, having checks. But I think the checks would probably be tiered. So if you can be shown to, basically the further back your family history can be shown to go, which is problematic for a lot of people. But I think that that's something that can weigh into what you would get. Now, I've found out from DNA analysis that apparently I descend from like the first wave. So it's like basically the first wave that hit, South Carolina, and eventually, like, my family got to Alabama, via Georgia, and then my siblings, their mother, we have different mothers. Their mothers' people actually come from Virginia. Although it's interesting, they were emancipated in the early 1800s, at least some of them. But even there, you were still going to be behind the eight ball, but I would think that would be less. So, it's not that it can't be done. I think it could get complicated, but
yeah, Tommy's saying that finding out, who would get what would cost, cost for that would be in the billions. And I mean, if it were that straightforward, the amount of money that the government would have to pay out would pretty much break the government. But
I disagree. We spend $750 billion on the military.
One thing to remember, though, is because of history, because of the way that things have rolled out, the majority of people of color, not just black people, but people of color in this country, are poor or lower class. When they get money, anybody poor like me, when we get money, we spend it. So a lot of that money that that people are like, oh, it's going to cost what? It's going to go right back out into the system.
Right.
I mean, they'll be paying off their houses. They'll be buying cars. They'll be putting away for school. They'll be
paying up bills.
Things. Yeah, doing things that they couldn't do before or struggled with before. So that money would be actually a boost to the economy. So yes, it would cost a ton for the government to throw it out there, but it's going to come right back again. Maybe not immediately, but a lot of it right away.
Yeah. Well, in fact, Dave Chappelle even covered that in his on his show. Like there was reparations day, and then like Verizon said how many thousands or millions of Verizon bills got paid, and the electric companies all got caught up, and
it would be for the economy. It would be a boon. I mean, we just got a check from Peach's health insurance. Because she was in the hospital. There was a thing called hospital cash, where they give you an X amount of dollars for every single day you're in the hospital to cover lost wages and to cover anything you might have bought while you were in the hospital. It's this really cool benefit. Shit, we spent it. We're like, oh, hello. I went food shopping. I mean, that's what happens when poor people get money.
They spend it. Well, and that's the reason why whenever there's a stimulus, economic stimulus plan, I always prefer a bottom-up stimulus. You don't give tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires. You already have money to spend. Give it, you put it on the low end, and then, like you said, people will. Like Jon Stewart pointed out in the 2008, when Bush's bailout thing, where he bailed out the banks, it would have been cheaper to pay off everybody's credit card in the entire country. Now think about that. pay off we spent more giving bennies to people who already have billions than it would have cost to pay off every single person's credit card. And of course, if we had paid off everybody's credit cards, what would happen? They would have spent money. And that's the thing. So the banks would have had money to loan out, and there wouldn't be as much debt. We would have been kind of a reset. But people just, they have emotional problems doing that.
Okay, so couple of things. Mage Grey Wolf said, "How is people of color acceptable, but colored people is racist? You're just saying colored people the way Yoda would." Yeah, it's something that great. So Joe and I have actually had long conversations about this. People of color drives me up the wall. It is the acceptable term now for whatever reason. Joe and I, again, like we've discussed this, and we both kind of wish it wasn't. It's uncomfortable to say for that exact reason. It sounds too much like colored people.
That's right. Yeah. Grammatically, it's exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, I remember when.
Oh, sorry. No, go ahead, Kazoo.
I was just gonna say, I remember when even George Carlin was talking about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. And I actually refuse to say it. What's really even funnier is now a lot of times people are abbreviated as POC, which that even annoys me even further. But I've actually heard people say POC. They actually enunciate the word POC. I'm like, no, we're not POCs, you fucking idiot.
I know times change and everything like that. But when I was growing up in the late 70s and into the 80s, my friends who were black insisted they be called black. That was a big deal to them. They wanted me to acknowledge it out loud, right? And that was before the term African American had come into vogue, in my awareness, anyway. So that seemed to happen while I was over in the UK. At some point while I was away. I wanted to bring back to the point about reparations, though, because I had an idea about this a long time ago, and I know it sounds fantastical and unrealistic and everything, but it's like any plan; it just requires the will to do so. I mean, I think what they could do. I mean, we have to just accept that there's no plan that can fix it for everybody. There's no way that everybody's going to be happy with whatever the suggestion is.
Right.
So what you should do is pick a year, and not a year in the future, a year in the recent past, last year or the year before or whatever, and say every black baby born in America on that year is going to get on their 18th birthday is going to get $1 million that's been deposited for them from birth, and it's going to accrue. So they'll accrue to $1 million by the time they turn 18. And then all of those people, that entire generation of people, can be educated about, informed about good ways to invest money, and they can do whatever they want with it. But if you're educated in advance that you're going to have money to invest, and think about it on that level, you'd have an entire generation basically that would spring, help everybody before and after that spring forward.
So. On the same topic, Tommy's like, yeah, you give them the money and they spend it and then they're broke again. You spend it and then they're broke again, keep dishing out money. Come on. We're not talking about $50. The idea, when you put money, like large amounts of money, into the economy, it creates a loop. I mean, it usually does. It normally does. It will create a loop. You spend that money on all different kinds of things. And I mean, builders end up working, restaurants and stores end up hiring, engineers are needed, people improve their living situations. So, I mean, all kinds of things happen, and it creates a cycle, where the money doesn't just come in and go out. It just keeps funneling through again.
Well, here's another thing too. I just did the math out. So there's roughly 44 million black people in the United States. If you gave everybody 50,000, regardless of when their people got here or not, just to make it simple, you gave everybody $50,000. It's $2.2 trillion. Sounds like a lot. However, we gave that much out just for coronavirus relief back a few months ago. So it's not like we can or never did it. We did that much when we did the bailout in 2008. So it's not like we haven't done it when we wanted to.
Paul, I thought you told me that when we come on the show, you're not going to bite.
I'm sorry?
It really sounds like Tommy was bitten by Brock.
I want to address something that Tommy said in the thing. Just tell that to the white guy who's collecting cans. Well, that guy's not paying any of the taxes either, Tommy. So, and secondly, you're doing something that the right wing does a lot that drives me nuts. Basically, try to play one marginalized group off against another. I want to help the guy who's collecting cans too, because that's why I believe in the social safety net. And that's why I believe in all these various programs to help people. See, if you don't, for sure, then you can say, well, why are we going to help these people when we don't help these people? I want to help them both.
And the white guy collecting cans isn't collecting cans because him and his parents and his grandparents and their grandparents and their grandparents and their grandparents weren't subjected to a system that intentionally kept them down and kept them from building generational wealth. So there is a difference.
Here's an argument for people like Tommy and for Brock. Give all of those people $50,000, just like Joe's saying, because it won't be long before I have a lot of it in my hands anyway. So just give them the money and just let things play out, because I am confident that as a white guy, I can screw some people out of money, right? We need more money in play so I can screw more people out of money. Just give them the money.
Right. I don't know how accurate you are that a lot of it will end up in your hands. But yeah, when there's more money in play, though, more people tend to make money. And the more they make the money, the more they spend.
And just so you know, the current size of the U.S. economy as of 2018, so it's actually slightly higher now. I can get no here it is. It's 22.32 trillion. So we're literally talking 10%. Now you could do it over multiple years. You could say, okay, $2 trillion is a lot to give out in 1 year, so we're going to give out 10,000 a year for 5 years to kind of spread the pain out, so it's not so onerous. We spent more on less and gotten less.
Hey Dev, just want to say real quick, your mic is causing a lot of feedback when others are talking. So when you're not talking, you should mute.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I will. Thank you. I'll keep that in mind because I can't hear it. So, all right. Thank you. I wanted to say that we were talking about like Black and African American and people of color. When white people say Black, it sounds funny. It sounds cringy. It sounds like it just sounds
Black.
And sometimes, depending on the person, sometimes when they say it, you can actually even see it in their face.
I want to address something that Phoenix Writer just said. I don't know about reparations. I kind of feel like those who live now who would pay for it didn't have slaves, didn't cause the stealing of the work. If you receive stolen goods, that's still a crime. It doesn't matter if you didn't steal them.
It also doesn't matter whether or not that you're not the person who owned the slaves or created it. There was still a loss. There's still a demographic, and not even like a couple of people, an entire demographic that needs to be made whole.
Well, right, and here's the thing that I find kind of bizarre. And again, this is something Marianne Williamson talked about. Again, just one non-nutty thing she said. She said, everyone understands with Holocaust victims and their families that, the Nazis stole their shit in large, they stole their art treasures, stole their clothes, stole everything. We had no problem, the countries of Europe and the United States had no problem ponying up tax dollars to make them whole, because we recognize that there was wholesale theft of their entire culture. It's no different. Only thing is, this instead of happening over a 10-year period, this happened over 350 years.
Every white person in America has benefited from stolen work from slaves to this day.
Right.
Every white person.
That $22 trillion economy we have is the way it is because we had slaves, and then we continued to marginalize people post slavery.
Yeah, Phoenix Writer, but that's the same as saying, I'm a white person that's poor. Therefore I don't have white privilege, or white privilege doesn't exist because I personally don't see it. That's the same kind of a thing. And whether or not you benefit, or whether or not you believe that you benefit or not, you do. And whether or not you personally feel like you're seeing a profit from it, over time your family has, unless you're like first generation or second generation American. Maybe then, maybe not. But just there are things like generational wealth. That's one of the big ones. I mean, Black families in the U.S. have suffered a great deal from not being able to build that kind of generational wealth.
And when we did, in like Tulsa is a great example where we actually did, and people literally bombed it and killed a bunch of people and burnt it to the ground. I have an uncle who this is in Alabama. He was a successful businessman and he gave credit to the locals. So the Black population was able to get credit and all this, and they were being very successful. And people had him, basically white people, formed a posse. They grabbed him and then they had him declared mentally ill, stuck him in a mental institution, and then had him killed. So here's even stuff that's going on today is with housing discrimination and employment discrimination. This is happening now. They've done tests where they have resumes and they put a resume on and it has a Black sounding name like Tyrone Johnson or something like that. And then they have something that sounds white, like, Biff Harrington III. And the exact same resume gets more hits with the white sounding name over the Black sounding name. So this is today. This isn't 100 years ago. It's not 250 years ago. This is now. Same thing with housing. They've done tests with this where somebody will call up and they'll have a voice that's identifiable as a Black person, and they're told, oh, the place is rented at, it's not available anymore. And then they'll have a white person call up and they, oh yeah, sure, come on down, take a look at our place. This is now. This is today. This still happens. So yes, don't tell me you don't benefit, because you do.
So I have a crazy argument here. If we were to just ignore like all the history involved and just look at the fact that we got some poor people right now in the present and they need help, I'm okay with, like, if you want to ignore all the history, just like increase welfare spending and we'll just help all the poor people presently. If that's what you want to do, if you want to just ignore history, we could just work on the problems right now if you want.
Because a lot of that money is going to go into his hands, he believes.
Yeah. Well, and also having Black relatives doesn't mean that you are. That's not it, Tommy. And I want to say I think you know that. So if you're going to argue dishonestly, then you can be ignored.
When I say increase welfare spending for poor people, that's the thing. The thing I think is the problem is it doesn't matter if there's a history involved. Even if you parse everything down to like, okay, maybe they do deserve something for the history, they still don't want to spend the money. It doesn't matter what the reason is.
Right.
They want to spend the money on poor people that need help.
Right. That's right. Because that's the thing. The same, like I said before, the same people who don't want to give reparations also don't want to help that white dude collecting cans. And that's why it's such a bullshit argument. Like if you're willing to help one and not the other, okay, you can try to make an argument one way or another, but you can't use one against the other if you're not willing to do either.
Now, something that goes through my mind, I don't know if I'll be able to explain it well, but when people are told that white people are told that they benefit from what are we supposed to do about it? What are white people supposed to do about it other than, well, you should feel guilty? It just feels to a lot of people, oh, you should feel guilt over it, and it's just like,
no, but I don't want guilt is a wasted emotion. Guilt does nothing. That's not what I want. I want action.
What do you mean? What are people that don't have any power to do anything supposed to do about it? Why should they continually be reminded of it if not for a guilty feeling?
No, the whole thing is, okay, look at the marches. People said, hey, here's just one example of systematic discrimination committed by the police. People went out and said, hey, stop doing this. Stop unfairly targeting Black people and other minorities with police violence. That's action. And that's power. And so even and most people who did that were not the big and wealthy. They were people on the bottom end that have very little power. But in groups, they have power.
Who the fuck is Johnny Sandtrap?
An idiot, apparently. And actually, half of all homes in Alabama had slaves during the period. So you're wrong.
Welcome to the show, Johnny, Phoenix Writer, Tommy. You're all welcome. I just wanted to know who the fuck that guy was.
So does that mean that if someone isn't politically active in being an anti-racist, then they're contributing to a system of racism?
Okay, but being anti-racist and feeling guilty are two different things. They're not synonymous. And I mean, I've seen people, I mean, online, it's most of the people that I encounter in as far as like social justice and stuff happen to be online. But I've seen them say quite often, I don't want your white guilt. White guilt gets me shit. It doesn't do anything. So nobody wants white people to feel guilty. People who do are probably shitty people, regardless of their race. But yeah, the goal isn't to make white people feel guilty. It's to be anti-racist, which means basically not be silent when you see racism. That's a good way to start.
So that kind of seems like someone should dedicate a certain percentage of their life to to black causes, otherwise they'll be considered racist.
No, you're projecting. That's no one's saying that. What I would say, if you don't do anything about it, well, you're looking the other way. You're letting it happen. That doesn't mean you're a racist. And just that basically, you're also not doing anything to stop it.
Complicity with an oppressor aids the oppressor.
Right.
Yeah. Silence always helps the oppressor.
And Phoenix, I got to address Phoenix writer. So the fact that there were some people in Alabama loyal to the Union is irrelevant. That doesn't change the fact that half of the households had slaves. So they're not mutually exclusive. So you think this is a big got you. Sorry, no, you're wrong. That's a fallacious argument.
Because I get where you're coming from. I'm an advocate of something.
No. Now you're more fallacious arguments, Phoenix writer, and I'm surprised because you don't normally do that. So I don't know why you're doing that. I don't know if something got under your skin, but that's wrong. No one claiming everyone in Alabama was racist. I made a claim that was factual, that 50% of households during the period had slaves. That's an undisputable fact, whether you like it or not. So it doesn't matter. That's not in any way stating that every single person in Alabama is racist. No, I know that you're basically you're engaging in fallacious arguments, and I've never seen you do that before. So it's very upsetting. But you're a lie. You're lying to me right now, and you're basically saying I'm saying things that I'm not saying. So that's why I'm coming back at you.
What were you going to say, Michael?
He don't know.
I had a bit of my thoughts knocked out of my head right there. But yeah, I like a different perspective on politics. I call it big dick politics. Hear me out. We're the greatest country on earth. We should not have poor people suffering. So I want to have all the people who have make a bunch of money, give it to the government, and then fix all the problems, because the greatest country on earth should not have these problems. We should have pride in ourselves to the point where it doesn't matter if they fucked off their former life and they don't even deserve the money. I don't care. I don't want poor people in my country. So I want to make a whole bunch of money, give it to the government, and so that they just fix it. Right? Make the money, give it to the government, they fix it.
Yeah, there shouldn't be a homeless problem in this country, for instance.
No, not if we're the greatest.
I mean, there's two sayings that come to mind. Like, one is you're only as strong as your weakest link.
Yeah.
One, and the other one is a society is judged by how well they treat the least among them. And if that is the standard, we're doing really bad. We're doing really, really bad. But
now, one thing I want to say too. Now, Phoenix Writer's response though shows exactly why there's still a problem, because it makes people uncomfortable, and they don't want to deal with it head on. So nowhere did I say everyone in Alabama was racist. I expect I'll say explicitly now, not everybody in Alabama is racist now or then. That doesn't change the fact that the idea that only 3% of the households had slaves, that's a lie. That's not true. So I'm sorry, but that's just a fact. So you can, okay, in that case, Phoenix Writer, that don't ever address me again. If that's how you're going to be, because if basically you're uncomfortable, too bad. I don't really give a shit. You're straw manning me, and you're telling me I'm saying things that I'm explicitly telling you I'm not saying. So go fuck yourself.
Now I wish it wouldn't have gotten that way.
Yeah.
There's this element where people are told, oh, well, you need to feel uncomfortable. Well, what's the difference between making people feel uncomfortable and making people feel guilty? There's a spectrum between that. And yeah.
Sorry, I was unmuted while you were talking. I don't know if it made feedback. If it did, I'm sorry. Being uncomfortable, when someone is uncomfortable, they tend to want to not be uncomfortable anymore. And there's two things that you can do to rid yourself of that. You can hide and avoid any kind of confrontations or hide from any topics that are going to cause that discomfort, or you can work to change those things that are making you uncomfortable. I mean, so when people say you should feel uncomfortable, what they're saying is you're being presented with facts, and those facts should make you stop and think, wow, that's fucked up. That makes me uncomfortable. I should examine why and what I can do about that. I don't think that's a lot to ask, not just on the topic of race, on anything that makes you uncomfortable. You need to ask yourself why. It's something Sarahan used to say a lot. Sarahan 06, for those of you who may remember him. I have fond memories of Sarahan. He was one of my best friends on the tubes. That was something he would say all the time. If something is making you uncomfortable, you need to ask yourself why, because you're the one with the problem.
I remember Sarahan, or at least his eyes.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I think what a lot of people, I've heard a lot of people say, and I've said this myself, is that tough problems can't be solved unless people are willing to engage in uncomfortable conversations. That doesn't mean I want people to go around being uncomfortable, but if there's a subject that's touchy, well, ignoring it and avoiding it doesn't fix it. All it does is it pushes it to the back, and it can perpetuate it. So so for instance, the talk about the guy with the cans, Tommy's talking about, oh, what about the guy, getting the cans? Well, for some people, that's an uncomfortable conversation. What do we do about that? And that's something we should do something about, because there shouldn't be people who are collecting cans to subsist on. There's something dramatically wrong with that. Why do we have a society where there are people who with multiple billions of dollars, and other people that are picking up cans to get some food? There's a fundamental inequity to that, and you can't tell me the person who's making billions of dollars worked that much harder. I mean, I bet you the guy picking up cans works pretty hard trying to get all those cans.
I have a different perspective, because my grandmother used to take me to parks to collect cans. We used to pick them out of the garbage cans with nails on sticks, and we had no need for excess money. She was just doing it because it's a way to make money and pass the time. We lived in a great house, but it was a way to make sure things don't end up in landfills. And it's not very glamorous, and it doesn't take a degree to do. But if it pays well, if somebody finds a niche where there's a lot of cans, and if it's paying better than other jobs, it should be thought of as something that's worth dignity and respect. I mean, it's recycling.
Yeah. Well, and that is another big problem in our society, is that people have this huge tendency to denigrate menial jobs.
Yeah.
As if that's somehow disrespectful to do a menial job. Like, so here we, on the one hand, we have this like Protestant work ethic where, you have to work, you have to work to eat, and, your value in society is based on how much you can earn, and your ability, your willingness and ability to work and earn. But yet we'll have people who doing very tough jobs that most of us don't want to do. And then we look down on them. Like, we look down on custodians, we look down on the sanitation workers, we look down on people working, sewage plants and all this kind of stuff. Like,
your waiters, your hotel cleaners, whatever. Exactly. What I wanted to say about that is, I mean, that's not a uniquely American or even Western problem. I mean, that's kind of goes more or less around the world throughout history. I mean, the caste system in India, for example, if you're on the very bottom of the scale, they're very much looked down on. I mean, they're absolutely not equal.
Right.
I think there's it's an interesting thing to contemplate. How hierarchical systems develop, and whether it's natural or whether we just don't know any other way because that's how we've been doing it for so long.
Well, here's another one. Again, this is another something that could be an uncomfortable conversation that I think needs to happen. Is about these. So you're looking at those jobs and you think about the whole argument to try to get $15 an hour minimum wage, and you have people say, "Oh, well, $15 to flip burgers." Now, I've personally never worked in fast food, but I think everybody probably knows somebody who did. It's not.
You probably flipped a burger in your life, right?
Yeah, and the thing is that you're not just sitting there. Well, think about it too. If just say someone's a short order line cook in a Greasy Spoon diner, no one says that person is flipping burgers, but it's
He's literally flipping burgers.
Yeah, it's a similar job. So why do we so somehow if you're doing it at McDonald's, somehow that should be denigrated. It's bullshit. And then they'll say, oh well, the EMT person's only making 13. Like, well, then they need to make more money too.
I mean, in all honesty, I mean, I worked in fast food, and it's an awful job. It's a miserable job. It's an awful job. And I mean, I owned a restaurant, so I was the grill cook, and the dishwasher, and that was dreadful. There are aspects of that job that are difficult, that are hard work, that are literally heavy, hard work. And I mean, it's long hours and it's very hot, and it's kind of thankless. And I was the owner of the company, so I wasn't even getting paid. But I mean, so $15 an hour for either of those jobs, not enough. That's not even enough. And then the argument becomes, well, what about paramedics and stuff making $15 an hour? Burger flippers should make the same. No, nobody's saying that. If a paramedic is making $15 an hour, he's getting raped. He's not even getting ripped off. He's getting raped. He should be making more.
Right.
But
a few years back in the UK, there was a story about how the pilots on some of these discount airlines like Go and EasyJet and Ryanair were making like 22, 24 grand a year.
Holy crap.
And do you want the guy flying your plane to be making 24 grand a year? I mean, do you really want someone that's the level of qualifications he has to have? That's what he's willing to sell for with his jet flying qualifications.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy. And here's one of the things too, real quick back on the over to the reparations thing. Now, one thing we generally are talking about reparations with regard to the United States, but I actually think the colonial powers of Europe owe reparations to all the countries of Africa.
And what would that look like?
Well, it's the same thing. I mean, basically, if you look at where things are today in Africa, what was instituted by a lot of the colonial powers were two things. One, they drew national borders not in line with the tribal borders. So and this was done on purpose in order to have squabbling groups. So if the people below are squabbling with one another because they're of different tribes, different cultures, whatever, then they're not fighting the colonial master. And then they can say, oh, so you need us. That happened in India. You need us to administer and keep you safe because, those guys over there, the other tribe, the other religion or whatever, they're going to come and get you. And of course, I'm telling the other guy the same thing and fomenting, what's going on. So now we know for a long time, hundreds of years, the resources of Africa were plundered. When the colonial powers pulled out, they had already built up a culture of corruption in a lot of these countries. Again, it was another way to keep power. So you make everything based on payoffs and bribes and stuff like that. And so that's what they inherited. And it's very hard from within to change that culture once it exists, because you literally can't accomplish anything unless you're operating within that system. And the people who benefit the most out of that system have a lot to lose. We're getting. Oops, that was me. There's so people who are benefiting the most by that system have every reason to perpetuate and maintain it.
What is the region of oh God, it's the region of India that India and Pakistan have been fighting over forever?
Kashmir.
Why am I Kashmir? That whole
Bangladesh
situation. that whole situation was sparked by the colonial powers, right? I mean,
Yes.
and they still haven't worked it out.
Right.
They were playing one side against the other.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had actually learned a lot of this from some Indian people. I'm in New Jersey. There's a lot of Indian people here, so I found from multiple. Then I did my own study on it on top of it, and found that most of what they were telling me was actually true. And they very much use that as so you end up with areas that are high Muslim population or other areas of higher Hindu population, and they basically told the minority in each of those, hey, you need us because those other guys, they're gonna hurt you, they're gonna kill you. Now they probably weren't, but now they believe it. It's just like Trump out there with all his disinformation scam of telling people, people in the suburbs, if you don't vote for me, the Democrats are gonna turn the suburbs into minority land.
The worst thing I've seen as far as that colonialism really destabilizing a region was when I researched Sierra Leone. Because Sierra Leone had a very corrupt government that was allowed to borrow money from the World Bank. The new regime that came in was allowed to have a new country called Sierra Leone in the exact same place, exact same grid coordinates. But the only way that they're allowed to have a country is if they accept the debt that the previous dictator took on and then absconded away with the money. So successively, we have this debt from these former dictators that doesn't get bankrupted. It doesn't get washed away. Anyone who wants to have a country in those grid coordinates with those people has to take on the debt of Sierra Leone, right, which is wrong. There is no world stage equivalent of bankruptcy that they're being allowed.
Right.
I mean, as far as like people talk about the colonial powers, I mean, colonialism in Africa by the Western powers, I mean, it's still happening. It's still going on. It isn't countries anymore, though. Now it's corporations. I mean, Africa is hacked up into all these little pieces by different companies, Exxon, and all of that. It's all just hacked up into pieces that they can exploit any way they want.
Here's a quick one for Johnny Sandtrap. So you're turning the suburbs into minority land in the name of diversity. So what's wrong with minorities moving into suburbs, Johnny?
They're already there.
So basically, it's kind of no. Oh God, he's a sovereign citizen. Please boot him.
Something that I was thinking about as the conversation went on is I find it interesting that oftentimes the people who push the whole Protestant work ethic, where hard work, that makes all the difference, are usually the first people to make fun of those who are working lowly jobs the most too. I just find that curious.
So do I, to be honest. And I think anybody I just have a hard time understanding why. Never mind. Forget what I was going to say.
Johnny, I didn't make the point that it was actually happening or would happen. I'm asking you, what problem would there be if minorities started moving into the suburbs? Why that would be a bad thing? I bet you don't have a really good answer.
We got to wait for the chat lag now.
Well, I think it's a good thing because I've been waiting for housing values to fall so that I can. I'm just, I'm greedy, and I want a house at a good price. They're all overinflated. So if we could just move some of these minorities around, this is my plan. Make everybody feel like everybody needs to flee everywhere. That would be good for me.
I'm asking you.
You're encouraging white flight.
Yes.
I'm asking you why you're concerned, Johnny. Why does that scare you?
Yeah.
While we wait for Johnny
to a plot, I don't know.
Paul, are you aware that you're in a winter storm warning area right now?
Yeah, tomorrow is going to be really bad snow. And today was probably the last warm day we're going to have for a while. I should have done more chores today, but I didn't do anything. Anyway, I kind of wanted to shift the conversation a little bit, if that's all right with y'all.
Sure.
because one thing that's been happening, and we discussed this a little bit last week, but we really only sort of touched on it. I mean, my mind is blown, and I'm heartily encouraged by how many people are early voting. And, you know, I can't remember the last time I saw the number, but I know it was well over 50 million last time I looked who've already voted early. And in some, you know, I think last time around, less than 140 million voted in total. So we're already more than a third of the way there with like almost 2 to go. And now Tommy from the Bronx and I had a conversation on direct chat on Twitter, because like he says, you know, Trump's going to win, basically, long story short. And I've been looking at a lot of the polls that I see, and I can't think that like Texas is in play, Florida's in play, even Arizona's in play. But there are other points to be made. Like, just because a lot of people are early voting doesn't necessarily mean they're all not voting for Trump. Because I know North Carolina registered a record number of Republicans this year.
Nationally, there's so many problems with the way people look at a lot of these things, but nationally, the trend seems to be that Democrats are voting early, and Republicans are saying that they're going to vote at the polls. So we're going to get like a semi-result on election night that doesn't reflect reality, and some people are going to celebrate when they shouldn't be, and some people will complain when they shouldn't be, and they're going to have to wait, whether it's days or weeks, until the actual results come out. But yeah, I mean, as far as like the early voting and mail-in voting, it's mostly Democrats that are doing that. A lot of Republicans are waiting. I know in my county, because I look at these numbers all the time in my county, in some areas of my county, 75% of the Democrats have already voted. And the number for the Republicans is 40%. And they're like, oh, that looks really good for you, Rob. That looks good for you, Rob. And I guess if you're looking at percentages, but when it comes to raw numbers, there's twice as many Republicans as there are Democrats here. So
something to remember too with this as well, though, is that it's the electoral votes that decide the presidency. So a lot of this early voting isn't really going to be affecting the electoral votes.
Well, I mean, so who wins the state is obviously what affects the electoral votes. And like already in the state of Texas, more people have voted than the total number of people who voted for Trump last time. So, of course, a lot of those people who are early voting in Texas will be voting for Trump. It's Texas after all, right? So you can be sure that some of those are Trump voters, but you can also be sure that there's an awful lot of not Trump voters in that group.
Yeah.
And if Texas is in play, I could be wrong because I'm going off memory, but I think Texas has 35 electoral votes.
Yeah, that's about right.
Which would, if Trump lost Texas and kept everything else, he would have 271, so he'd still be president. But if he lost Texas, he couldn't afford to lose anything else. Not anything else.
Right.
You know?
Texas has been very slowly, very, very slowly has been creeping towards purple over the last several years.
Right.
And I mean, there is a possibility it could flip this election.
There, it's the blue that's moved from California and that's crept towards them. They weren't creeping towards anything. It's the blue crept towards them.
Right.
So yeah, but overall though, the state has been less red. And I mean, this could be the year it flips. Maybe not, but for the first time in a very, very long time, it looks like it could.
Well, yeah. The fact that it's even in play is very telling. Now, the other thing too that I saw that was very encouraging, I saw something a friend of mine posted. I reposted on Facebook that it showed the number of people in the 18 to 29 age group who early voted, and for 3 states, it was like Florida, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and it was way higher. And in Michigan, especially, last time at this point when we're with the same distance out from the election, there was like 7,000 people in that demographic had voted, and now it was like 140,000. So that now, and I got to think, we know from various polls in general that the people in that group vote Democrat, way more than they vote Republican. Like a 2-1 margin.
People talk about the polls a lot too. Paul, you brought up this whole segment talking about the polls. And people tend to look at the national polls and they get all excited, and then they're reminded. Remember, Hillary was at about the same in the national polls, about the same place, and she lost anyway. Don't pay attention to the polls. The polls are wrong. Two things: the polls weren't wrong. Her numbers ended up exactly where the polls. I mean, it was pretty much dead on. It was the Electoral College that got her. It was where those votes landed, not the number of the votes. That's why she lost. And if you're going to pay attention to polls, you have to look state by state, because that's the only way to get any kind of a real idea. Because we should have learned from Hillary that the national poll is almost meaningless. So
well, I mean, just still though, I mean, if we pay attention to the polls, which it has to do with what the people's votes will be, it still doesn't necessarily reflect the Electoral College. I think Trump still has a really good chance of winning, unfortunately, via the Electoral College.
He can't be written off, that's for sure. But if you really look at it, right, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania were all won by less than 1 point. I think Pennsylvania was like 0.2 of a point, right, which is ridiculously close. So you can't really call those red states, right? Not really. And I know both campaigns particularly are pouring everything into Pennsylvania right now. Ohio, which has been polling really favorably for Trump up until about yesterday, looks like it might be in play now. And no Republican has ever won the presidency in my lifetime without Ohio.
Yeah. Now the other thing too, as far as the states, like I'm basically in Michigan, Trump has been, as in on the state polls, Trump has been way behind, 7 points on average.
So I have some real numbers that are not a poll. Some states have laws that you can't count the votes until the actual day of the election, right? But we have a secrecy sleeve and an envelope that we put our ballots in Colorado. That envelope has a barcode, and when they are received, they get scanned in so you can track your ballot. We have ballot tracks. So 25% of the ballots that have been received are from registered Republicans. 38% are from registered Democrats. Then the rest are from unaffiliated, or like this little tiny sliver of Green Party, right? Those unaffiliated voters were not there at the last election.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing here in my county. And again, those are the exact numbers that we're looking at, that we're paying attention to. The director of the county Democratic Committee, he hits me up with those numbers every now and then. But it's percentages. And I don't know about there. Well, you said the percentage of the ones that were turned in already. We're looking at percentages of the party, like of party affiliation, which is a little bit different. But I mean, even still, I mean, any way you slice it, even in this red county that I'm in, Democrats are actually showing much better than they've ever shown before.
So
yeah. I have a chance.
Hey, Tommy, you say Biden should have kept quiet about fracking. Well, the thing is, he was asked about it. Should he just say, "Oh, I choose not to say anything" when he's asked about it? I mean, what do you do?
Right.
I might offend a man named Tommy from the Bronx or Brooklyn, wherever he's from. So I can't talk about fracking.
I actually think it was good on Trump to bring that up as far as like a tactic. Trump's in a position where like the coronavirus has done him in my opinion. Nothing else matters as much as that. But for him to sow those seeds of discontent between the far left and Biden, it could be as effective as Ron Paul or Bernie Sanders were in their own parties, just as far as moving that Overton window after everything's done. I mean, he could have saved fracking for 10 years because of bringing it up in the debates, because Biden had to concede, oh, well, I'm not going to kill it right away.
The thing that gets me about fracking, and this as a chemical engineer, this drives me nuts. So I hear the proponents of fracking say, oh, well, the runoffs of the fluid is just water. No, it's mostly water, but it's that, and they're like, oh, it's only like 1 or 2% of other things. I'm like, 2% phenol will kill you. Actually, 1% phenol will fucking kill you. So it's kind of disingenuous. There's a lot of chemicals that in very small quantity will do quite a lot of harm to your body, even if they don't kill you, may have long-term debilitating effects. Fracking is bad news. Beyond the whole earthquake thing, which again we're seeing in areas where in fracking zones we're seeing way more tectonic activity than before, way more earthquakes and all sorts of shifts and stuff like that. Plus,
Oklahoma.
oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, Oklahoma, fucking Oklahoma, which never moves anywhere, all of a sudden has all these earthquakes, and plus the fact that you know the I was going somewhere with this. Yeah,
it's not
that's right.
Of water that goes down.
But I remember it was So basically, the problem is that there's three types of water that we drink. There's surface water, there's groundwater, and then there's the aquifer. Now, surface water is exactly that: rivers, lakes, ponds. Groundwater is the stuff you dig wells for, and then the aquifer is deep, and it's basically below a layer of, I guess, a shale. And basically, it's filtered. It's been filtered through the earth. It's basically the earth has been one big, sand filter and filtered this water down. It took eons to get there. It's very, very clean. If you pollute an aquifer, these aquifers are not like little local things. They're huge, enormous deposits of water. Once you get any contamination in there, the whole aquifer is fucked forever, or at least in our lifetime. It's not gonna be fixed anytime soon, because there's really no method to really do that. So why people are willing to risk the cleanest water they're ever going to find and really were to get out small quantities of oil. It makes no sense.
I'm totally against fracking just in general, because I think the sooner we move away from fossil fuels and into a sustainable energy future, the better. It's as simple as that. We're already too late. We should have been started back when my kids were still in diapers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The idea that we're going to use fracking as a bridge, I mean, that's the way that Biden is selling his support of fracking, is that it's a bridge. Doesn't make any sense to me. If we're going to use anything as a bridge, it should probably be nuclear power, and just stop fossil fuels altogether and just switch to nuclear and use that as a bridge. Power a lot more, a lot cheaper for a lot longer. At the same time, you're not dealing with the pollution that you get. And from what I understand, the storage of like spent nuclear rods and the waste water is a lot better than it used to be, and it's a lot more efficient. So, I mean, we wouldn't be dealing with the problems that we had back in the 70s and 80s when people were like, what the hell do we do with all this shit now?
Right. Well, the French came up with a process to reprocess rods so that the actual amount of waste material would be a lot smaller, and they could actually reuse a lot of that fissile material in future rods.
Well, I learned something new today. Yeah. Obviously, nuclear power. I've always been like an anti-nuke guy ever since I was a little boy, and I understand though that if you can, minimize and store waste safely, it's probably one of the most efficient ways to create energy. What I'll tell you all this for free, friends. I will gladly trade all the fact that they're burning all these trees as biofuel power plants. Burning wood has got to be one of the least efficient ways to make heat energy in the first place. And wood obviously takes an awfully long time to produce. And once it's gone, it takes, decades to come back, if it's going to come back.
Right.
And so if nuclear fuel means we never have to keep burning these forests, I'm all for it.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, Paul, I mean, you think about it way back, we stopped burning wood as direct fuel, and we learned to make charcoal, because we realized that charcoal actually burns hotter and everything. So you basically drive off the impurities in it, and you make the lump coal, and then that's a lot. Yeah, so you're right. I mean, trees are a really shitty thing to burn.
One of the things Trump said in the debate during the fossil fuel and fracking thing, he said, "What are you going to do? Wind? Windmills kill the birds." I worked at Vestas making nacelles for wind turbines. And in the front office, they have this little pamphlet for dummies. That's one of the questions that's like the first question they answer is, do windmills kill birds? Have you seen piles of dead birds around windmills? Have you seen?
There's,
Right? But the thing that kills the most birds of anything is actually the domestic house cat. If we all cared so much about goddamn birds, we'd all get rid of cats and become dog people.
Right.
Oh yeah, I mean it's definitely one of those kind of like red herrings. Like, well, what about the birds? Like people who never cared about the birds all of a sudden care about the birds.
There are no piles of dead birds around those wind turbines. You can walk right up to them.
Keith Olbermann made a video where he actually talked about the numbers of things that kill birds. And he's like, yes, windmills do kill about 240-something thousand birds a year. Yes, they do. But electrical lines kill over 3 million a year. House windows kill millions a year. So yeah, a couple 100,000 for windmills.
Right. When I used to live in Cornwall in the UK, there's quite a few windmills. Various farmers use part of their land to let those windmills go up. It's a good way to get double use out of the land because you can still use it for agricultural purposes while there's electricity being generated on the land. And they've obviously got the same idea here stateside, because when I drove to St. Louis back in August and we were coming across Kansas, and oh my God, the wind farm is bigger than a city. I mean, it goes on and 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 on forever. And the highway's full of trucks with these massive windmill parts on, and just one rotor blade needs its own special truck. It's like a specially designed truck, specially designed for the rotor blades, and the tubes are the same. The tube is actually part of the truck that's towing it because it's so fucking big.
I think it's something that it's kind of telling that everyone on the panel so far and everyone in the chat is basically, yeah, there's no reason to be on fossil fuels anymore.
Right.
It seems to be consensus. There's absolutely zero reason to be using fossil fuels anymore.
One thing that I found when I didn't expect it because in Texas, but when you guys know Divinity 33732, so during my walkabout last year, I ended up having some extra time in my schedule. So she lives in Corpus Christi. So I actually took a little diversion and stopped in to see her. And I noticed both driving into Corpus Christi and I drove out a different way, enormous wind farms. And like a huge percentage of their power is even in Texas, oil barren Texas, they still had lots of wind farms.
Sweetwater, Texas has a whole bunch of them.
I'm all for it. I mean, people used to say in Britain, they used to complain, oh, they're eyesores. And I'm like, have you ever seen a power plant? They're not exactly, works of art,
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's in the Midwest, I would say like around Yellowstone, geothermal is something that would work also. I mean, you'll be taking energy and heat directly from the planet. There's plenty there.
It's infinitely available.
The whole state park, the whole federal park. But
one thing I thought was kind of interesting in Texas also is I saw at least one oil derrick being driven powered by a wind turbine.
There is part of a problem with wind turbines with at night they put that little red blinking light for aviation purposes. Those of us who do night photography and try to go out to where there's dark skies, now we have to contend with those blinking red lights because you try to do a long exposure and you can't get that Milky Way because you got these blinking lights everywhere. That is a thing, but Elon Musk is fucking us for night photography anyway by putting all those satellites in the sky. It's going to put a giant grid in every picture.
Right.
All those night photography pictures that we've all enjoyed having, it's not going to happen anyway.
Somebody asked about the petrodollar. What's going to happen to the petrodollar? And again, this is another one of those red herrings. It's like, well, if we get away from something that's bad for us, what will happen to that economy? I'm like, well, no one is worried about what what happened to people who did gas lamps and boot blacks and all that kind of stuff? You know what I mean? Like certain things.
Whale blubber. You know.
Yeah, the whole whale blubber economy collapsed. What are we going to do about that?
It makes me think about when people talk about the negative sides to universal health care, that an argument will be, well, what about all the people working in insurance?
Well, and the funny thing about that is you still need people to process claims. It's just that instead of them working for a for-profit company, they probably work for the government, or it might be the government contractor. But you still need, so you actually, all you would really lose is like the upper echelon of management, and basically like the boards of directors and all that stuff. That would be a government position. And so they'd be like a GS10 as opposed to somebody making millions and millions of dollars.
But I think it would be dishonest to say that some of those people, would be displaced. I mean, some of those people are going to lose their jobs. Some of those people are going. Not everybody, is going to be able to transition into the new thing. There's not going to be a need for as many. Right. You're not going to have the competitive type of a market where you have all of these different companies employing these millions and millions of people. There's going to be a lot of people but that's the thing, is that's part of what happens in progress. Always. When you switch from one thing to another, as we've done over and over and over again through time, there's always people that have to retrain or relearn, and sometimes people are left behind, and that sucks. I mean, all you can do is try to harm reduction. Right. Is really what ends up. You have to take some steps that are for harm reduction.
And the funny part about that is that, like, when I hear people on the right wing who bring these things up, I'm like, but the side you're on isn't for any of the things that would mitigate that problem. So, they're kind of self-fulfilling. You're not for job training programs. You're not for retraining things. You're not for subsidizing people's transitioning jobs and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, the left is actually, generally speaking, in favor of those things, and that's again why you need a good safety net. I think, like, for instance, these coal jobs. Now the coal jobs are going away. They're not all going. Not every job's going away, but eventually they'll mostly be gone. They'll probably never totally go away. But basically what you do is you try to get the younger people that are in it to transition. They're likely to have a better chance of transitioning, and you keep the older people until the job doesn't need to get done anymore.
Man, I'm just thinking about the how during on this last debate, and it was brought to Trump's attention how there are people that live close to oil refineries, and the pollution they deal with gives them health problems. And Trump's response to that was, well, they're making a lot of money, so it doesn't matter. I was like, are you kidding me?
He doesn't care.
Yeah, and again,
that's next to one of those places.
Again, and that's a very right-wing thing of, everything's compensation. Money is the ultimate compensation for everything. And like, well, no. Yeah.
The thing that really sort of chaps my ass when I see the conversations about whether, renewables and a Green New Deal and so on is a good idea. I mean, you can argue about the Green New Deal all day long, but what you can't argue about is we need more renewable energy. I mean, that's a given, right? And the thing is, it's in everybody's interest, right? And since fossil fuels are by definition a finite resource, it only makes sense that we should take other steps to prolong the length of time that finite resource lasts. Meanwhile, we should learn to barely depend on that finite resource so that it lasts effectively forever.
Well, exactly. I mean, the thing that gets me about as far as the Green New Deal goes, and mind you, I am not a devotee of AOC. I mean, she's good sometimes not. I've had ups and downs with her, but the funny thing about it is all the panic over it from people on the right wing is it's only a framework. It's not like it's a comprehensive list of everything we're going to do. It's like, hey, let's commit to these principles. And then we can work out the details once we've agreed on the principles. So there's nothing to be afraid of because there's literally no details in it as far as where we're going to do this and we're not going to do that. It's just simply here's the objectives, And what's wrong with that? And again, if you think the objectives need to be revised, fine. That should be the criticism then. I don't like this objective. I think we should substitute with this objective or whatever. But it's just literally the idea that it automatically means that we're going to shut down manufacturing, and that's always the right wing scare is like, oh, which is stupid. I mean, hell, I'm of the political left. I obviously don't want manufacturing to go away. My livelihood's dependent on manufacturing. It'll change. How manufacturing is done will change, and that's good.
They're going to take away your hamburgers.
I was recently watching, it's years old now, but I was recently watching some docudramas about how the early American industrialists sort of, basically built industrial America in the 19th century. And there is Vanderbilt and Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie is the one I've been watching lately. But anyway, I mean, these people, one thing that they had in common was they basically took enormous financial risks themselves. They didn't wait for the government to come in and give them a subsidy to invest or whatever. They risked everything they had and said, you know what, I think oil's the thing. And Rockefeller did it. And he effectively had a monopoly on the entire country's oil supply. And Vanderbilt had the railroads and Carnegie had the steel. And so it went on. And these people could have played it safe, but they didn't. They took huge chances. And we don't have that kind of entrepreneurial thing going on now. Anyone who wants to make a big investment that's for the good of everybody is going to be hand out to the government, give me a subsidy, you guys pay for it, I want all the profit.
I don't have a problem with government subsidies as long as it's going to something that actually is worthwhile. Like oil companies today get tons in subsidies, and they really shouldn't. There's no reason. I mean, these are the most profitable companies on the planet. Why are they getting welfare?
Well, especially when they're getting a lot of the subsidies are for oil exploration, and like that's what you do. You're an oil company. That's literally the principal thing your company does is to try to find oil so you can tap it. Yeah, we shouldn't get it. Now, I think for emerging technologies, I think it's a good spend. It doesn't always work out. They love to throw out. I forget the name of that solar company that Obama gave money to and it went bust. But that's the whole thing with any emerging technology is some things are going to pan out and some things are not. But if you look at like particularly in the 50s, NASA was doing a lot of like general aeronautics research, some for the space program, some for aircraft, and they hired a lot of companies to build prototypes for them, and they did the research, and then whatever research they had kind of filtered back out to the market, and that's a good thing. And that made it put America as a leader in those areas, created a lot of jobs, led to the space program. I think Cylinder. Thank you. I couldn't remember the name. But yeah, some of them are going to fail and some of them are going to succeed. If you look, because I've always been into the military and military equipment and stuff like that. If you look at the number of prototype aircraft that failed, it dwarfs the number of ones that actually ever made it into service. That's just the way it goes.
There's a couple of things like we were talking about, like oil companies getting subsidies for exploration. And we talked about this before. Shell used to be Shell Oil. They're now called Shell Energy because they're doing a lot of research into renewable fuels, algae, and that kind of stuff. So there's that. And you said something else I wanted to address. Oh, post-war World War II, America. We talked about this, I think, last week. America was in a position that the rest of the world, especially Europe, just wasn't in. We were in a position to take advantage of the fact that we were pretty much the only country that wasn't bombed to shit. We had the resources, we had the products, we had the people, we could do whatever we needed to do to take care of the rest of the world. And that's, really the American empire was built on the post-World War II era. So,
Yeah. You know, Johnny said that the oil is renewable, but regenerates. Well, yes, but takes millions of years. So so it will run. The current amount of oil will run out long before any more regenerates.
Yeah. I mean, we can't really wait on that. I imagine somebody just sitting like by an oil well. Yeah.
Hey, do you guys ever have Cold War nostalgia? And by that I mean there was a set of rules. America couldn't swagger around too much because we had a check. You know what I mean? Ever since we lost our check, our swagger has just gone further and further and further. And with it, people have been dying and dying and dying. You know,
I was going to say no. We always had a swagger since World War II. I mean, but yes, there was like a rhythm to the world where the Soviet Union and the U.S. kind of kept each other and everything else kind of in check. There was a rhythm. There was a dependability since the Cold War ended, that's kind of gone. And then when we declared, organized groups that don't really belong to any kind of real country, when we declared them to be the new big baddie, and declared basically a global war, everything's been fucked up ever since.
Yeah.
The thing that makes me sort of laugh about the end of the Cold War, trademark, registered U.S. pat off, is because like all of the missiles in the silos, the ones that we haven't got rid of because of treaties, the ones that still exist, they're turned on and pointed at cities right now. Never haven't been. It's always been the case. We have always been under target ever since any one of us have been alive, right? We're not under any less of a threat because those bombs still exist. The fact that the Cold War ended and they told us the Russians aren't our enemies anymore doesn't change the fact that they're all turned on and pointed at us.
Actually,
Why do we allow ourselves to feel any safer about it?
Part of Start 2 actually was that they were supposed to be detargeted. Whether or not they actually were, I can't say. I'm not an inspector, but that was actually part of the treaty, was that that basically we would actually, because the thing, now mind you, to actually give them the targets takes a couple minutes, so it's not like they can't be put back, set up to
Isn't that the same treaty that Trump said about a year and a half ago that he didn't want the U.S. to be held to anymore?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was one of the nuclear treaties, I know that.
And that's why it's so infuriating, because basically, that's a treaty. And look, and that was H.W. Bush. To his credit, it's that, overall it's a good treaty. And people could say, well, Russia is not totally sticking to it. That's fine, but it's overall just the content of the treaty is actually pretty good. And you got to give H.W. some credit for that. It was just like when Bush II got rid of took us out of the ABM treaty. I mean, what was so stupid about it is basically the way the ABM treaty worked is Russia had built 100 ABMs and they had deployed them around Moscow. We had none. And then, we took ourselves out of the treaty. We haven't built any ABMs. So all we did was we had a situation where Russia was limited to 100. And now we took away their limitations, and we did nothing to actually build any for ourselves. So we gained nothing out of getting out of that treaty.
Hey, but we used a Moab.
Yeah. And that's another one too, that Moab. It's such a all balls, no brains kind of weapon. Because basically what happens is when generally speaking with weapons, you get diminishing returns on the force. So the bigger the bomb you get less and less of an impact, which is the reason why is actually in most of the stuff in the military, they switched from a single bomb to bomblets. It's actually more effective for the thing to break open and spread out a bunch of smaller bombs. You get more impact for the same amount of explosive. So basically we built a bomb that was already obsolete before it was ever conceived. And it was all because so somebody could beat their chest and say, "Oh, we used the Moab, aren't we? Hot shit."
Well, I mean, the Moab is like, it's meant to be like, hey, man, we're gonna fuck your shit up, but we're not going nuclear, so we're not really as evil as the Moab actually is.
Right.
I mean, it is just under the force of the very first nuclear explosion, if memory serves me right. It's like half that or whatever.
Yeah, about that, yeah.
That's still a pretty big fucking bomb. So there's nothing moral about it. The fact that they try to sell weapons as being somehow more, I mean, bombs especially more moral. I mean, on the one hand, on the other hand, back in the late '70s when Jimmy Carter was president, I think they signed a treaty to ban the neutron bomb because the neutron bomb only vaporized living flesh but left structures all right.
That's not exactly correct. That's how it was reported. What it is,
that's what I remember being told in high school.
Oh yeah, that's what the media said. What it was, it's an enhanced radiation weapon. So the way it works is that for basically 1/10 the explosive force,
right,
you get 10 times the radiation. So the idea is that a 1 kiloton ER weapon does the same radiation as a 10 kiloton. So you don't do as much. There's not as much destruction. There's not as much.
So basically, you're not looking to vaporize people. You're looking to get them all cancer and mutations.
Pretty much, yeah.
Right.
And the EMP effect is bigger and all that. So it's enhanced EMP and stuff like that. But it's and the thing is, they ended up not bombing, they were not outlawed. We still have ER weapons. In fact that briefcase nuke that we've heard about, which does exist. It's not exactly a single briefcase, but it's a small portable nuke, and that is enhanced. That's an enhanced radiation bomb as well.
So the Moab has a tactical use other than just destroying a city. It sucks the air out of caves, and it burns up the oxygen to the point where everything within the blast radius, it takes about 2 minutes for the oxygen to return. And even then, people are going to be incapacitated. They'll have passed out. Our Marines then go in and just put bullets in bodies that can't defend themselves, right? Which is much better for our death tally, for our own soldiers. So we suck the air out of the caves, then our Marines go in and shoot bodies, and that's the whole thing. You can't get that with bomblets.
True. Now that reminds me of the whole thing with the flamethrower, and George Carlin had a whole riff on the flamethrower. Think about the concept of the flamethrower, because somebody had to say, hey, I'd really like to set those people on fire over there, but I'm much too far away to get the job done. And I will tell you what, I watched a lot of stuff about World War II, and when that was how in a lot of these island campaigns that we kind of literally burned the Japanese out of some of these caves with flamethrowers. And it's a really gruesome weapon. I mean, it's a really horrible way to go. Because the thing is that the stuff that's being fired from it is effectively like to call it napalm may not be exactly accurate, but it's effectively jellied gasoline. So what ends up happening is that as it hits you, obviously sets you on fire, but then anything that hasn't burned off yet will stick to you and continue to burn. So it's a fairly horrible way to go.
Well, it sounds awful. And what's almost worse to me, but it's not worse, but it's just, I mean, someone thought that shit up. Someone, I could make some, flammable jelly that, gets worse when you try and take it off. And it's just like, oh, that's a great idea. We'll buy 10,000 of those bombs. I mean, there's a whole series of fucking shit ideas in a row there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, look at chemical warfare as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, chemical warfare is gruesome, man. I mean, phosgene is it's chlorinated compound, and it just tears up your lungs and your skin and your eyes, and it's just really, really gruesome. To the point, it's so nasty that Hitler refused to use it during World War II. That's how fucked up it is. And you think about that after World War II, we were still doing chemical weapons research. It's like, hey guys, if it was too far for the Nazis to do, maybe we shouldn't do it either.
Well, I mean, the thinking often is you have to be prepared for what your enemy is going to do. I mean, you know, you have to fight. You have to fight the next battle, not the one that you just.
No, I agree, but there's a difference between saying, okay, we're going to come up with a defense of it versus we're going to come up with a way to do it back at the other guy.
Now, in Moscow, at the end of the Cold War, they had a whole system set up, a doomsday device. Have you heard about where basically if they were at war with us and we somehow defeated them and breached Moscow, that it would like set off every nuclear weapon they had all at once.
Wow.
All like on automatic. It would that kind of a thing where just an auto go. It was kind of like, yeah, if we're going to lose, fuck everybody.
That's scary.
It's just another one of those evil ideas that I can't wrap my head around. Why people, I mean, I don't know. How do people come up with this shit? That's what I want to know.
I hear about these things, but when I was in the Army working on the electronics, what I worked out in my head is the people most likely to nuke anyone were the U.S. We had specific protections in place for our technology for EMPs.
Right.
So there were pieces of these electronics that I was working on that you can't find in commercial electronics anymore. You don't find JFETs and MOSFETs everywhere in electronics anymore. You know, you find the capacitor, the resistor, you know, you don't find JFETs. Right. The reason why the shit costs so much is because they're hardening everything towards us using an EMP from a nuclear weapon in the air to knock out all technology except our technology will work.
Right.
There are tank systems that look like an old Victrola record player, only it's a cylinder. You put the cylinder in, you crank it, right? It will reprogram the entire tank. All of the programming that was lost and wiped by the nuclear bomb will go right back into the tank, and then it will be immediately usable again. Right? They did this so that we could do it, and everything would be leveled, and then we'd have an advantage.
Yeah, I mean, and to Mike's point, I remember probably late 80s, early 90s, the doctrine for the U.S. was we wouldn't ever use biological weapons. We would only use chemical weapons in response to somebody else using chemical weapons against us, and we reserved the right to use nuclear weapons whenever we saw fit, which is pretty fucked up.
There were some APCs that I saw that had these. It looked like missiles pointing down toward the ground. They would shoot pylons into the ground and then be able to communicate with another APC by sending messages through the ground. Right? We had this technology, right? We were the only ones that had it. Everybody else lost comms with an EMP. We would still have it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely a big part of our doctrine. Was it because the belief was, well, the Soviet horde was going to be so big that we wouldn't be able to stop it with conventional means, and we would just have to nuke them at some point.
Regardless of that, even if it was just if you had all the electricity taken out, which is my understanding of what those things do, right? It nullifies electricity. I'm not sure for what period of time, but I think society would break down within 48 hours without electricity.
It would start to, for sure. Well, and the proof of that was during Sandy here in New Jersey. I mean, like 2/3 of the state the power was knocked out, and things started to really, people were like in a daze. They didn't know what to do. They're like, the power was off. Like, oh, it doesn't work. They no one knew. And for some people were without power for weeks. I actually made a video about that, and I basically made the point: all these conspiracy people who think that rich people are doing all these various things to control us. I'm like, if they really wanted to control us to the degree that you're saying, all they would have to do is literally shut off the power. They could get us to do anything if they shut off the power.
Right. We don't know how to live now without it. I mean, when's the last time I skinned a fish? The last time I was about 15, or killed a fish. So that's the last time I actually had to forage for food.
Mm.
And I don't know how to skin a deer. I don't know how to, I know how to milk an animal.
Would it count if I knew how to connect my house to my generator?
Yeah.
Count at all, or am I still using electricity?
If it works, I was under the impression that after those things go off, that electricity won't work. That there's like a resistance in the air or something that.
It's really the electronics that get burnt out.
Yeah, it's the problem is everything with a transistor in it is going to short and burn out. Your cell phones will be fried, but hard wires will still exist, and after a while they'll start working again. So you'll be able to put power in your house. If the light bulbs didn't burst, they might still work. If they weren't screwed in, you could screw in the replacement. Maybe.
Yep. Well, the funny thing is that when it comes to that, because I've thought about this, and I came to the conclusion that if something that bad, if we had a big nuclear exchange and everything was all screwed up, I don't want to survive. And it's like people. So I've had people say, "Well, if you can't hunt and fish, how are you going to survive in the wasteland?" Don't want to. Hell, shit! I have a hard enough time dealing with what we have now, let alone a radioactive wasteland.
When I was in high school, we used to have that conversation over and over and over with various different permutations of, would you want to survive if, and what if it happened someplace else, but the whole world still had radiation, or what if it happened right here? And, you couldn't even find out if your loved ones are alive or dead because, like you say, communications are all down. The infrastructure is completely smashed, Even if your loved ones are only 30 miles away, if you're on foot, that's a long fucking ways.
Nobody remembers anyone's phone number.
Yeah, there's a movie. It was in the 50s and then it was remade in the 90s, I guess, called On the Beach. And the premise is that there was a major nuclear exchange. Soviet Union and United States, pretty much obliterated themselves. And now there's these radioactive clouds, blanketing the earth and traveling. And so down in Australia, they hadn't been hit with any initial nuclear blast or anything like that, but the radiation cloud is coming. They know it's just a matter of time before it comes and kills everybody off. And basically dealing with the people that are still around and how they handle the fact that knowing that, they only have, a few weeks or a couple months at most before the radiation comes and kills them off. It's an interesting movie. It's obviously it's a downer, but it is a good movie.
Post-apocalyptic movies. I think it's uncomfortable to look at those possibilities, but it's actually worth doing because we should be scared of that shit. It's important that we take it seriously so we don't accidentally sleepwalk our way into a nuclear conflict by thinking. I mean, I was worried about this in the sense that, I know there's certain video games, for example, where you've got a nuclear thing you can just fire from your shoulder, and it's like a tiny little nuclear weapon and whatever. And so you've got this whole generation of people who might think that tactical nukes are perfectly fine.
Yeah.
And you've also got politicians like John Bolton who think tactical nukes are perfectly fine. So.
Well, and actually, something you just said reminded me of the conversation we were having earlier about being uncomfortable. The movie The Day After will make anybody very uncomfortable.
Yeah,
because it's a very uncomfortable subject. But again, seeing that movie and allowing yourself to be uncomfortable and saying, "Hey, is this the world? Do we want that kind of, even as a possibility in the world? What do we have to do to prevent that?"
Right. Yeah, I watched that movie during lockdown while I was in the UK. So within the last sort of 6 or 8 months, and it was actually more harrowing than I remember it being. I hadn't watched it probably since the 80s, so it's been a long time. But anyway, the thing is, because I grew up in California, so I was always under the impression that if they told us at all, they being the government, that the nukes were on the way, you get like a 30-minute warning. Because it comes over the poles, doesn't it? Unless they're firing from submarines, of course. But anyway, so you get the 30-minute warning. And we used to have conversations all the time about what would you do in that last 30 minutes, or do you think they would even tell you and blah, blah, blah. But let's say for the sake of argument, you're in Kansas like they are in the movie, and missiles go off. So there ain't no, I mean, 30-minute warning. You're the first person to know.
Right.
They're the first person to know how fucked they are. And when I watched it, that's the part that really did my head in, because it's not like you're having to depend on finding out the hard way. You see it happening, and you have to confront it right now. And to me that was like fucking heavy and hard to contend with.
Oh yeah, that scene is pretty heavy, because I remember the one part where like the mother sees them go off, she's just like no, because it means her family's in peril. And it's a really, and then, the funny thing is that Phoenix Wright is right, that movie did change things. It made people. There's also, and I can't remember the name of the movie, but there was a similar movie that the Brits made, and it focused on Britain and what would happen, if there was a series of nuclear exchanges. I forget who it was. There was I was in a hangout with a bunch of people, and somebody was saying how he was obsessed with apocalyptic movies. And I ended up, over the course of like 3 weeks, I literally watched every single apocalyptic movie ever made. At least as far as nuclear exchange and stuff like that. And so I ended up seeing some good films. And but yeah, it's you couldn't watch those and not be unsettled. And anyone who could watch that and still think, oh yeah, tactical nukes, yeah, definitely we should do that.
Yeah, right.
Is nigh insane.
Well, years ago, I was going to do a video, like 10 years ago, I was going to do a video about nuclear conflict, and I started doing research about it and realized that it was too big of a topic for me. It's beyond my YouTube ability, really, to do that topic justice. But among my research, I was researching these papers about what had been written about, just if India and Pakistan kicked off at each other, because they're right next door to each other. And they each supposedly have 50 or 60 nuclear weapons. So if each of them used half of their arsenal, the whole world would be toast. That's it. Nuclear winter's in inevitability. It's only a matter of time. And that's where the 50 nuclear, an exchange of 50 nukes. So if it was a larger conflict between two bigger, nuclear powers, it doesn't bear thinking about. So that, what I used to say in high school, I still stand by that now. All things being equal, I'd rather the bomb landed on my head.
And well, that was one thing in living in New Jersey, that was never really an issue, because, basically where I grew up, we're right close to New York City, right close to Earl Naval Weapons Station, where they kept nukes for the submarines. Near McGuire Air Force Base, which was like the Military Airlift Command's headquarters at the time. Where Rob is. All the oil storage in Carteret and Linden and Rahway, the refinery there. So it was like, yeah, I'm in between like 7 or 8 targets. In fact, when the nuclear target list, during one of the treaties, that they had to exchange lists and say, okay, here's the places that we've been targeting. And so there was this one game I played, Twilight 2000, which was based on like a war that ended up leading to, like nuclear exchange. And they actually listed all those places in their quarterly magazine. And my town was actually on the list because we had at the time we had the Nike Hercules missiles, which, for people who don't know, the Nike Hercules missiles were nuclear armed surface-to-air missiles. So the idea was that if enemy bombers were coming in, you'd actually just shoot a nuke at them and blow them out of the sky.
We have here in Vernon. Vernon is, bumblefuck. It's Trump country. It's rural. A lot of woods. You've been up here, Joe. But there's it's also a communications hub. Satellite dishes all over the place up here, everywhere. And it's
Right.
because
Well,
it's a
Colorado
communications
has
hub.
NORAD
So a lot of
and it has a nuclear weapons production facility. So Colorado is going to be radiation if there's ever if it ever goes down. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. 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 So basically, my
As was
attitude.
with London, when I lived in London, you're right there. There's no hope.
So for me was if I had any advance notice, I was going to go to the shore, like any of the coastal line, anywhere between Rahway through what the fuck town is that? Howell, because then you're basically right along the coast. New York City's right across the bay, and then you're with all these other targets. I'm like, I'm just going to go there because I know that I'm going to be in the middle of all these things, and I will most likely get vaporized. If I'm not vaporized, I will be irradiated to death very quickly.
I was able to find on the map a town in New York State that is far enough away from any major targets that if there were a nuclear war, they would survive the blasts. And I remember fairly recently when everybody was afraid that Trump was going to start a nuclear war, I had said to my kids, okay, here's this place on the map. Wherever you are during the day, if it ever happens and you get, there's a warning, like why he had that warning. If there's a warning that there's like incoming missiles, get in your car and head there. And everybody was in agreement. But then a few days later, it was just like, Dad, I don't know if that's a good idea. I think I'd just rather get blown up.
Yeah.
Who's going to want to live through that? So.
From the age of about 10 or 11 onwards, and I stopped when I was in my 30s, thank goodness, but I used to have Armageddon dreams about nuclear war in one permutation or another for years and years and years. It stopped shortly after I moved to the UK, but most of the way through high school, I'd have a dream like that every night. Some of the scariest dreams I've ever had were sort of nuclear war dreams where everything was smashed and nobody knew where anybody was, and yeah, it's fucking horrible. Sorry, are you replying to the chat, Joe?
No, I'm actually looking for that. What the name of that movie was? Oh, it's called Threads. It's a 1984 film. It's a really good film. Yeah, it was really funny. I mean, I remember just like when I was watching all these movies, I was just so obsessed, and basically every night I spent like 3 or 4 hours just watching these movies until I got all the way through them.
One movie that sort of deals with this in an indirect way, and I think is kind of in certain ways a little bit too similar to what's been going on with Trump and everything, is The Dead Zone, where Trump is Martin Sheen, and Trump is exactly that kind of guy you can imagine who would hold up a baby to block a bullet, right? I mean. Trump actually made that character, that thing, believable for me in that movie.
Oh yeah, he's really craven. I mean, and like I said, I think it's kind of ironic about him is that the people who supported him, they said that they were against, identity politics, and they voted for Trump. It was totally about identity, their identity, and what he did for their identity.
I've been saying it for years. All politics are identity politics. All.
Right.
Kazoon, you must have an opinion about that.
I'm still in flux on that subject, so I don't really have anything significant to say about it right now.
We've discussed that. It didn't go well.
Are you saying you're decision non-binary then?
But yeah, and that's the thing, because it really comes down to with him, is it basically he, for a segment of the population that likes him, they like the fact that he's unapologetic. So he makes them feel. Because we were talking before, Kazum, about people feeling guilty. It's like, so they're like, oh, he doesn't make me feel guilty about being patriotic. He doesn't make me feel guilty about all the horrible things the United States has done. And he also doesn't make me feel bad about any of my more base instincts that might not be so great. And I mean, look, I don't dismiss it. I mean, it's definitely something that people have. See, one thing that the mistake that the left wing made long time ago was letting the right wing get away with the notion that the right wing was the patriotic side and that the left wasn't patriotic. They should have fought harder against that idea, because just because you point out the problems in your country doesn't mean you don't love your country. If anything, I would feel like you pointing them out because you love your country. You know, as I've always said, whenever, particularly for example, when Europeans attack U.S. for having, you know, because we had chattel slavery and all that, and I'm like, look, the thing about it is, here's the thing: when you look at America, you know, we had those documents that said, basically said this is wrong. If it was always there, even though we did it, and eventually it couldn't last. Eventually, someone had to say, "Hey, look, this document says this is wrong, and if we actually believe in this document, we have to get away from this thing we're doing."
And Europe made a ton of money off of the slave trade. I mean, Europe made a ton of money off of the slave trade. Well, they took full advantage of our foolishness.
Absolutely.
Full advantage. Well,
and even once it was outlawed here, the importation of slaves, a lot of the slave runners were Dutch and French merchants and some British. So, and it had been outlawed in their own countries like 1809. So it wasn't like they didn't know it was wrong, but they continued to engage in the practice. Yeah. So I'm like, plus I've always tell the Europeans that, hey, look, if we were to emulate all the heinousness that the Europeans have done over the last 1,000 years, the world would be covered in, you know, a meter deep in blood. So, you know, I mean, you just look at like the 100 Years' War and the War of the Roses and all manner of atrocities, everything that happened, all the colonial powers in Africa and in Asia, in the Middle East. So, you know, yeah, and plus, you know, a lot of them, they try to indict us over what happened to the indigenous people, which, you know, fair enough. But again, it started under them. It started under the Spanish. It started under the British. It started under the French and the Dutch. You know, we continued it, unfortunately, but they got us off to a pretty good start.
I mean, think about it, like Europe and blood. I mean, the UK alone. The UK alone, the amount of blood that they're responsible for on globally, not only globally, I'm sorry, no, in the UK.
Right.
I mean, how many civil wars did they have? It's like, come on, people, get your shit together.
Well, even if you look at just within like the United States, how can people say they love America when they don't care about all the citizens of this country? I mean, the people make up the country, and if you don't care about a whole segment of the population, how can you say that you care about the country?
Exactly.
Because there is a segment of the population that is in love with a piece of cloth. They worship the cloth, and that's a big problem. That again, that's not patriotism. That's nationalism.
Well, right. Well,
do you support ending the Pledge of Allegiance in school?
Yeah.
Well, I at the very least think we need to revert the Pledge of Allegiance to what it was before McCarthyism and get rid of the under God part.
Right. Well, it's the thing, you know, and you figure, you know, the way, like, I remember I've had a number of conversations because, you know, in the line of work I do, a lot of the workers are right wing. It's just, you know, it's just an unfortunate reality. So I've had, you know, good dealings with people, and they're like, oh, you know, you're pretty good for a liberal kind of thing. But where it all tends to fall apart is that, you know, eventually they'll ask me about flag burning, and I'm like, as an act, I find flag burning detestable, but as a patriot, I have to allow people to do that because it doesn't matter whether I like it or not. That's if you actually believe in free speech and free expression, then you have to be willing to let people do that, even though you find it offensive, and I find it offensive.
It's the entire point of the First Amendment.
Bingo. So once you want to criminalize, once you start criminalizing. And these are the same people who yell about political correctness. And like, you don't know, look up the word irony in the dictionary, and here's your face.
Yeah, and it's funny that Trump, you know, complains about censorship so much, and yet he's pushing for there to be a 10-year prison sentence for burning the flag.
Right. Right.
The Supreme Court has already ruled twice in my adult lifetime that it's okay to burn the flag as a protest against the government or something along those lines.
Right.
Hillary Clinton actually.
A lot of the people who are against flag burning have clothes with the flag on them.
Right.
And that's just as disrespectful.
Hillary Clinton actually pursued legislation to make burning the flag illegal, and she wasn't obviously not able to get it done. So, I mean, and it's a topic that they just keep coming back to, and it's because people do get off on the symbolism. So,
yeah.
And you asked about the pledge. I'm sorry, you asked about the pledge. Yeah, I have a real problem with the pledge, and not just because of the under God part, which is the worst part of the pledge, but in a free country, people shouldn't be required to take some kind of oath of fealty. That shit, like, that's what dictators do.
Right, I agree. I thought that when I was a kid, even, I was aware that it was brainwashing, and I'm remarkable today that I'm 58 years old. I haven't had to say it for 40 years, and I can still recite it without having to think about it. Right.
Well, it's a thing, and you think about it, like one of the problems for the Germans during prior to World War II or the lead up to World War II and everything, is that Hitler had his generals swear a loyalty oath. And so a lot of these were Prussian, a lot of these guys, they weren't necessarily not, Nazi types, but they put a lot of stock in their word and their honor and all this kind of stuff. And so then once he started doing things that they were like, hey, we shouldn't be doing this kind of stuff, but they refused to go against him because they swore loyalty oaths and they didn't want to give up their oath. Now, personally, to me, at a certain point, no agreement made under duress is binding. So at a certain point, I would say, well, you've told me to swear this oath to Germany, and you're not actually doing anything for Germany. So I don't, I would have found a way to say, okay, well, I'm going to honor that oath by opposing you. But I guess in a lot of cases, some of the upper officer corps, they actually had to swear to him personally. And so some of them didn't feel comfortable opposing him because they had sworn that oath. And I was like, no, you should never be in a situation where, because you've pledged loyalty to somebody, that you're going to do something that that you find morally objectionable. Which is why I talk to people about like conscientious objectors. Like some people that really hate even the idea of conscientious objectors. And like, look, if someone says, hey, look, I'm not willing to kill, period, or I'm not willing to kill in this instance for this particular reason, I support that.
Yeah, well, I don't support the concept of a draft at all. I mean, on the other hand, there's arguments for conscription. For example, since around 1980 at least, everybody who's in the military has volunteered. I suppose maybe some people go in the military to get out of prison sentences sometimes, but most people join the military as a volunteer. They volunteer because they want to either for whatever their personal reasons. Let's just go there. And so it's harder for me to feel sorry for people who get sent away on bullshit wars than it is for me to feel sorry for people who didn't have a choice. They got sent. When people went to Vietnam when I was a kid, the vast majority of these people did not have a choice.
Right.
And to be told to go and kill someone, I can't imagine ever doing that. I can't imagine killing someone because someone else told me to.
Right.
I understand it's a lot different when bullets flying past your head. I get.
Yeah, I would say it's a little bit different than that, though. It's not like that straightforward. They're not being asked to kill somebody. They're asked to be they're being told to be forcibly put into a position where it's either they kill or get killed. It's actually even worse, so.
Well, now I'm generally against a draft, but I do see the advantages to a draft, and that is it makes even the children of politicians be forced to go into these wars. So it ends up like the attitude that the general populace will have towards war will be more negative.
I agree with that, but I think it's high. Yeah. I think it's too high a price to pay to achieve that. I mean, why aren't people just generally against war because they don't want to add to the pain and suffering in the world?
Well,
They don't think about it.
Well, plus the fact that we know during Vietnam, while on paper everybody could end up going rich or poor, powerful or powerless, but as a practical matter, that wasn't really what happened. In fact, I forget the name of the song. I think it's CCR. When he says, I ain't no senator's son. And that was his point, is that if you're a senator's son, you probably found a way out. Or if you for instance, we know Bush the second. He went and was in the Air National Guard, protecting Texas against nobody.
Fortunate Son was the song.
Fortunate Son, thank you. So as a practical matter, those things, and I agree with the principle, but they don't end up not happening. Now, if you could have a way to actually make that actually work, I'd be totally with it. And you're right, I do think that there would be fewer wars if the powerful had to worry about risking their own children.
Here's the thing I have to say about that. Now, I disagree with the concept of monarchy from top to bottom, inside and out. I don't think there should be such a thing in any country. But I did live in the UK for 31 years, and the Queen herself and all of her children and grandchildren served in the military. It's just what you do. You belong to the country. If you and there's a part of me which wants to respect that, although I don't think they should exist. So it's like I'm conflicted. You know what I mean?
I get what you're saying. Well, Paul, think of it this way: they shouldn't exist, but as long as they do, at least they did that correctly.
Hey, Elvis served, and he was the king.
I also don't like the Pledge of Allegiance, like Paul, but I have a more sinister feeling in my heart, because for me, growing up in the Assembly of God Church, I associate it as just one of the three pledges, and the other two are to the Christian flag and to the Bible. Right. And they sound just as rote. Their pledges are crafted to sound just like the other two.
Oh wow!
So when I hear the Pledge of Allegiance, I hear right after that the pledge to the Christian flag and the pledge to the Bible. And just as easily as you can remember the Pledge of Allegiance, you can remember those other pledges. They get stuck in your head through memorization.
Oh yeah. Oh hell, I used to be
when he says brainwashing. No, like I saw brainwashed people flopping like fishes in the middle of the aisles, thinking that they were speaking in tongues and shit, and they were doing that sort of rote memorization.
Yeah. Well, to your point, when I was a kid, I was an altar boy, and so I did lots of masses. And to this day, I could recite off the top of my head pretty much the entire Catholic Mass, and even to the point where I went to a funeral a few years ago, a business associate that died, and the wording has changed ever so slightly, and those words stuck out because I was like, that wasn't the word, it was something else. It actually like jumped out at me because the wording had changed a little bit.
That's how I feel every time I see the newer the updated CGI versions of the original Star Wars. Not the same subject, I know.
But well, it can be jarring though. Certainly, yeah, you're used to it a certain way, and then all of a sudden, what the hell is that? Well, especially we'll get
to not jarring.
Well, Jar Jar didn't bother me. What bothered me in the special editions where there was some stuff that was like minor enhancements, and that was nice. But then there was a lot of stuff that was just showing off, and it was actually just detracted from what was going on. Like when they're in Mos Eisley, and when they go up against the stormtroopers, and he eventually does the you don't need to see his identification. They had some shit walking in the front of frame, blocking the action. Like, I don't give a fuck about your ego, motherfucker. That's all you did was put this up there to show up. Look what we can do. Like, I don't care. That's the action is with the stormtroopers and Ben and the robots and Luke, not this monstrosity that's blocking the shot.
Well, probably the most irritating thing about the redos was they made it so Han didn't shoot first.
Right.
In that bar scene.
Yeah, apparently.
Absolutely criminal, if you ask me, because Han was a rogue. That was the whole point.
Right. Plus the fact that he shot first, but that was not unreasonable because Greedo was going to either shoot him or kidnap him. So as self-defense, you can still shoot first. It can still be self-defense.
Well, I mean, and just before that, Luke Skywalker cut someone's arm off, or sorry, Obi-Wan Kenobi cut someone's arm off. So, I mean, like, moral ambiguity, where are you?
Well, same thing when they redid E.T. and changed all the guns to walkie-talkies.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it was like, come on. I mean, if anything, it made even less sense because I'm like, look, the whole point of it is that the government is being oppressive. They're dealing with, the government's getting out of hand, and they're using force against people that shouldn't be used force against. So taking the guns actually softens the blow of that.
But what about a new Little Mermaid, though? Come on.
Well, I mean,
Let it sit.
all I can think about is how the original story, it was totally different than the Disney one. It was a bad ending, a sad ending and all that. They really Disneyfied it.
Well, that's the thing. Same thing with the Hunchback of Notre Dame. I mean, the end, like they're making Quasimodo a king and he's being hoisted on people. Is like, well, it's a nice message, but things end horribly for Quasimodo in the actual story.
Gazoom, the Little Mermaid, actually, the original was basically a gay love letter.
Huh.
Yeah, Hans Christian Andersen wrote it to a man that he was in love with that didn't love him back.
Oh,
didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. Well, the other thing too that gets
sorry, just real quick, Rob. How did you acquire that little nugget of knowledge? That's an interesting thing to find out.
I read it.
I mean, where was you? In what context was that?
No, over the years, people always talking about how Disney Disneyfies everything.
Right.
All rosy, and it was just one example.
Right.
The Little Mermaid being not what people think it is, and it isn't a feel-good story. It's a horrible story,
right.
And the story behind the writing of it is even worse.
Well, it's the same thing with there's a lot of stories that have been distorted, variations on the Little Match Girl. I mean, the Little Match Girl freezes to death. She's really, all those stories. In fact, it's kind of funny because Rammstein has done songs based on a lot of the, songs from Grimm's fairy tales and some of the German folklore, and Caroline in the matches, she literally sets herself on fire and gets immolated.
Did you guys know Quentin Tarantino is going to redo Reservoir Dogs, but with all women?
What?
I'm full of shit.
Okay.
I just want to see if anybody would believe that in 2020.
Did you never call it Reservoir Bitches?
Well, and that would be appropriate for dogs, right?
Yeah.
He had you so hard.
But the thing about the Little Mermaid is that there were some people getting upset because of a black Little Mermaid. And well, she lives in the sea. She lives in the ocean. She can be any color you want.
That was the reference before, and Kate getting upset every single time that we that the topic of movies and TV and stuff comes up. Every single time it comes up, she's like, "They go and ruin Little Mermaid. They ruin my childhood, and blah 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 blah." And I don't want nothing new because new things scare me.
Well, the funny thing is, you don't have to watch the new stuff. I don't like any of the new the Star Trek movies, the theatrical films. I didn't like any of the three of them.
Oh, speaking of, sorry, I'm sorry not to cut you off, but to cut you off. Speaking of Star Trek and Quentin Tarantino, he's supposed to be making a Star Trek movie.
I'm sorry?
Quentin Tarantino is making a Star Trek movie.
Okay, okay, fair play. You got me back.
No, seriously. Seriously. He is. It's absolutely. It's on the record. He's supposed to be making one of the upcoming Star Trek movies.
It's too bad I'll never be able to go into a cinema again.
All I can imagine is just squirting blood everywhere. You know,
Well,
them
see,
shooting at the ships and the other ships bleeding.
I mean, do you guys feel comfortable going to see a movie in a movie theater right now?
not really. I mean, some of the theaters around here, they're doing like 25% occupancy, so everyone's spread out. I guess if everyone's if they're actually enforcing masks and everybody's spread out and everyone's but even there it's still risky because you figure people are going to go in the bathroom, they're going to take their mask off and they're going to be schwitzing their germs everywhere. So
Yeah, but a lot of the times, I mean, if a cinema's got like 250 seats or whatever, 25% is still like 60 or so people, right? So that's, I don't know. I'm not sure I feel comfortable. They keep saying stay away from crowds, stay away from crowds, and so far so good. So I'm sticking with it. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Oh, same here. I mean, it's interesting. Marvel revised their movie release schedule, and because of obviously this was a lost year as far as them, as far as movies go, they've not changed the endpoint of Phase 4, so they've basically compressed it. So way it looks right now, assuming that they can actually open get into theaters next May, in a 14-month period, they're going to have 8 movies.
Wow. Wow. I mean, I feel sorry for the whole business. I mean, my son works in a cinema, and I'm not sure how much longer he's going to have a job. You know what I mean? That's one of the many things that is my I guess American privilege or whatever, that I bemoan the loss of things that I used to take for granted, you know. And it's not just going to the cinema; it's all sorts of little things, funerals and weddings, and you know, you could just go off on a list. And there's loads of little tiny things like telling someone a secret, you know, getting right up on a stranger, first kisses, all that kind of stuff. Wait, the whole politic is different now. And I wonder, you know, how long, if when it'll ever sort of rebound.
When it comes to movies, I'm wondering whether this whole situation might force the studios to focus more on smaller budgets. Also, whether or not some of these actors that get in insane pay will have to take a cut in pay in order to continue to make movies, because they're not being targeted for theaters, they'll be targeted for home viewing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think home viewing is. I mean, I really love the cinema experience. You know, I like that big screen thing. I was happy to pay to see 3D movies, you know, and all that kind of thing. And I really miss it. But I guess the only alternative right now is to watch stuff at home, as far as I'm concerned, because I'm just not putting myself in an enclosed space with like 60 or 70 people or whatever it turned out to be, you know. Entertainment's not worth risking your life.
No, it isn't. At the first presidential debate, Trump said that by the election, we'd have a vaccine. And just at this last presidential debate, he pushed that back a little bit out, you know, like by the end of the year, right? Kind of like how a lot of us were saying, hey, if we all just shut down for 2 weeks, this thing would go away. You know, 2 weeks turned into 2 months, turned into longer time.
But that's
we have to be more realistic about this. This like he, you know, Joe was saying May for, you know, us getting back into theaters. No. Like in the back of my head, I hear a lot of my friends and my clients saying, you know, we're going to get back to normal soon. You know, the vaccine's coming. I'm like, no, this is years. And I hate to be a Debbie Downer, so I don't bring it up all the time, but yeah, Marvel's going to have to rethink when they're going to release all those things, because each release is possibly going to kill a bunch of people if it's released in theaters.
Right.
They might have to do it digitally just to keep their timeline, because releasing in theaters is possibly killing people.
Well, you know, the other thing too, I'm thinking of, because they have to limit the number of people in a theater, because just to Zoom's point about budgets, I think if you remember way back before home video was a big thing, movies used to stay in theaters a lot longer. They didn't run on as many screens. So that's why, like, I remember during the first run, there was one theater near me, Menlo Park Mall. that they ran Empire Strikes Back for over a year.
Wow.
And of course, if you look at the number of theaters, like when Star Wars opened, remember, all the big long line, way back there was all these long lines and everything, because it opened in like 2,000 theaters. When the newer stuff opened, they opened up to like 4,400 theaters. So of course, you don't need big lines when there's more places you can go. So when you're running more screens, so in effect, because you have fewer people per screen, you effectively have fewer. You basically have 25% of the number of actual screen effectively. So if you've got 4,400 theaters, but you only put 25% of the people, you effectively got 1,100 theaters worth of capacity. So I wonder if that will change the whole thing of movies moving very quickly to home video and streaming and all that, because that's become so common now. There's some films that are on streaming while they're still in the theater.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, Disney Plus just recently did, Mulan. I think it was like $35, I think, to stream it. It was on their premiere service, whatever the hell that is.
Right.
Mage Grey Wolf said they wanted to see Ghostbusters Afterlife, and I just remembered, yeah, that's right, there was a new Ghostbusters movie coming. Damn it. And it was, do you guys remember hearing about this movie, Ghostbusters?
Yeah.
All chicks again?
No.
No. This was actually a serious movie. Out of all three, this would have been the most serious movie, Ghostbusters movie. But I think it was supposed to be a sequel to the first one.
Yeah.
So.
Oh.
Yeah, and in that regard, with the second one, obviously it was problematic for a lot of reasons. I think that it could have worked though, if instead of trying to make it a retelling, if they had those characters be proteges of the original guys and then having like a handing off of the torch.
Mm-hmm.
I think that could have worked a lot better, because now you're not at all saying, well, that stuff doesn't exist or we're in a different universe. You're saying, hey, no, we're still in the same universe. Well, because in fact, my premise that I thought of was that, well, obviously Harold Ramis is dead. So you could have had something like that. Egon dies fighting ghosts, and the rest of the team kind of loses their stomach for doing it, and they pass it on to their proteges. I think that could have been very nice, and it could have then also acknowledged Harold Ramis and him.
Did any of you guys see the most recent iteration of Bill and Ted?
Not yet.
Not yet.
I did.
Wow. I really want to see it. Although my memory of Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey is so fond. It's one of my favorite comedies of all time. I honestly think that for the first sort of 3/4 to even maybe a bit more than that, it's genius. And the last sort of half an hour or 20 minutes or whatever, with the whole robot thing and whatever, it just goes off track a little bit for me. But it's really quite like existential and deep, really,
It's I mean, all three of them are goofy and silly and kind of stupid, and it's one of the things that makes them awesome. And yeah, the latest one, we watched it. We made it an event here. We moved the furniture to make it look like a theater, turned off all the lights, and made popcorn, and absolutely loved it. It was just as awful as all the other ones. It was fantastic. Fantastic.
Well, that's the other thing too. There's a lot of movies that would be considered bad that I absolutely love.
Sometimes they're bad on purpose. So like Bill and Ted is kind of, it's bad. They're bad on purpose. I mean, it's part of
Princess Bride is bad on purpose, but it's genius because it's so bad on purpose.
Well, the Evil Dead movies, not so much Evil Dead 1, because I think that was actually attempted to be a serious movie, but Evil Dead 2 is
one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
Yeah. Who's laughing now?
Honestly, that guy, the movie is worth watching just for the scene where he's at war with his own hand. The acting that he did in that scene should have got at least a mention in the Golden Globes or somewhere, man, because it reminds me of Steve Martin in All of Me as well. He also gets in a fight with his own hand. And
oh yeah, that's a great movie. Yeah. Another vastly underrated movie.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's actually one of my favorite Steve Martin movies.
Oh, I absolutely love that movie. That's back when Steve Martin was still funny, you know. And we can debate all day when Steve Martin stopped being funny. When I was a teenager, I used to have his albums. I still have Let's Get Small, but I don't know what happened to my copy of Wild and Crazy Guy. But at the time those albums were brand new, I thought he was the funniest motherfucker in the world. I really did, you know. And then when The Jerk came out, and it's more or less a combination of jokes from those two albums made into a movie.
That's brilliant.
The Jerk is genius. Is a genius director, and The Jerk is just a great movie.
Oh yeah.
So we talked about real quickly. We talked about Bill and Ted, and Joe talked about Marvel movies before. Keanu Reeves actually is going to join the Marvel universe.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to that. Yeah, Keanu is going to be in one of them. I think he's going to be one of the Eternals. He's in the Eternals movie. So
you know, it's funny with him. Like earlier in his career, I didn't really care for him so much. But, you know, overall, obviously, he definitely proves me wrong. Although, I mean, I'm not a Matrix fan, but there's so many other things he's done that are actually really, really great. Plus, he seems like a genuinely awesome person as a human being.
You okay?
Yeah.
Joe, you just seem like you stopped mid-sentence.
Oh no! I mean, I told Paul I'm a little out of it today. Last night I was up kind of late last night, and then when I went to go to bed, you know, I got in bed and it was, you know, like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, and then I started getting chills. And yeah, I think I might have been it must have been food poisoning. Because I've been food poisoned a number of times, and I feel exactly the same way I had when I've been food poisoned before. Not as bad though. I think it's just a mild case of it. But I didn't.
Everybody, let's vote to see if Joe gets nose raped to see if he has Rona.
Oh, I'm going to check for sure.
The rest of you are too scared to vote. I mean, you're not even living in the same city as him. Come on, let's get his nose raped.
No, believe me, I'm going to get checked.
Joe, does it cost money where you live to get a coronavirus test?
No. The Union County has a program. In fact, originally it was you could only go if you were symptomatic, but then they changed it so that anybody could go. Like once they had enough tests available, they had it so everybody could go.
There's no testing site in my county at all. None. It's one of the things. It's one of my positions as far as my campaign is why the fuck aren't we doing anything about COVID? But yeah.
Well, see, that's about the right wing, because they're always like, well, we don't need to lock everybody down. Let's just find out who's sick and then lock them down and then protect the people that are vulnerable. And then they don't do any of it.
Right. Yeah. You need to test people and then contact trace and lock down just the sick. That's what they did in South Korea. And they've had barely an issue with COVID, certainly by comparison to the United States. And then one of the things that really makes me irate is when I watch the TV news here, how seldom they point out how other countries have done who've conquered the virus and what they've done. I mean, they mention it once in a while in passing, but mostly they just go, you know, Trump got it wrong, Trump got it wrong, Trump got it wrong. They don't. I think they should spend more time showing how, you know, like I had a conversation with my gal's son the other day. He's 30 years old, and he doesn't really believe the numbers and blah, blah, blah. And he thinks it's all like overinflated and such like that. But he seems to forget that this is happening all over the world. You know, this is not just an American thing. So whatever sort of political ramifications you want to throw onto COVID doesn't work in Italy or Vietnam or wherever, you know. Right. So this is one thing that makes the COVID idiots really particularly like idiots to me, is how they seem to think everything has something to do with making Trump not get elected, including COVID, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I know I see him on Facebook all the time. There's lots of people on the right who say things like, you know, it's the Democrats. This is all political. It's the Democrats. This is a hoax. And it's like, yes, you're absolutely right. The Democratic Party convinced countries all over the world to kill a certain number of their citizens and fake a pandemic just to beat Trump.
Yeah.
1 million people.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. That's what you know, what pisses me off. Like I had to go on site Friday for a little bit, and it's funny because to get into the building, they have a gate that's locked, and you have to sign in. They take your temperature, and you have to be wearing a mask. And then you go inside, and none of the workers are wearing masks at all. And I'm talking to the plant manager, and I've worked with him for a lot of years. He's not a bad guy, but he was basically doing like, not that it's fake or anything, but that's overblown, and that just you know, because I mentioned about the vaccine. I said we're not going to be in good shape till we have a vaccine, and he's like, well, what we don't need to vaccinate everybody. And like you can be a carrier. If you don't get if you don't get vaccinated, you can still end up being a carrier and bring it to those people that you want to protect. You can't protect unless you hermetically seal all the vulnerable people and never let them out. Then, you know, if you don't take precautions on the other side, they're going to get sick and die. Paul, you're muted.
Damn it.
Sorry, yeah, whoops. Every time there's a super spreader event, the way the media treats it is as if it's sort of speculation. I wonder if it's going to increase the COVID cases in this area. And now there have been enough of these super spreader events where they've had a chance to sort of follow them around and see. And sure enough, you know, like in 5 or 6 of them, they've had massive, you know, spreads of virus. And I come back to what I said a couple weeks ago. I mean, are we just ungovernable? Is it to the point where, you know, people so don't want to be told what to do that they won't even be told what to do to help save their own life? I mean, I suppose people smoke cigarettes. I know, you know, et cetera, et cetera. We all take risks with our lives, you know, and there's no such thing as a life without an element of risk in it. But I mean, I don't think this whole, like Trump said at the debate, you know, we have to just, people are just getting used to it. I don't think that's a strategy. It's a lack of a strategy.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, people are just like, you know, oh, there's some element of risk, and that's fine. I mean, if you're risking yourself, that's fine. But viruses don't work that way. You're not just risking yourself. You're risking everyone you know, and you don't have a right to do that.
right. Well, and that's the thing. And I once again will bring up, you know, the whole libertarian, the right-wing libertarian idea of freedom. That basically, you know, maximum freedom means if you know, if I don't have any responsibility, therefore I'm the most free. That's the best for me. Yeah, that's just flat out wrong. And again, the principle of non-aggression. If I could potentially be putting you at risk because I'm not taking precautions, then I am committing force against you. In which case, the society has a right to commit force against me to stop me from doing that. You know, and that's the thing too. Yeah, the Green Machine just said, you know, let everyone get sick is not a strategy. That is not herd immunity, right? The right wing keeps calling that herd immunity. No, that's capitulation to the virus. Herd immunity is when you have a vaccine. You have to vaccinate roughly 65% of the population, and then there's enough people insulated that it cuts the transmission down by a huge number, and then helps all those people who can't get vaccinated for a variety of reasons. But yeah, just letting everybody get sick and whoever doesn't die lives on, that is not a fucking strategy at all. Especially from the so-called, you know, pro-life party.
Hey, what do y'all think of Obama's speeches? He's been hitting the trail pretty hard and giving some pretty good speeches, and I'm sure they must be chapping Trump's ass. And not only that, but his first speech he did in Philadelphia the other day, I'm sure they took Trump's phone away from him because he didn't tweet about it at all.
I didn't see any of them. I got to look them up. I keep saying I'm going to do that. I didn't see.
Trump wasn't tweeting because, you know, Giuliani was caught with his pants down, kind of, you know, literally.
Well, I mean, I saw part of them, and what I saw was pretty inspiring.
The Obama speech, not the Giuliani.
Yes.
Thing. Okay. Because that was far from inspiring.
Yeah, right. The whole thing with Sacha Baron Cohen tricking Rudy Giuliani, and then Giuliani goes, "Oh, first he says, oh, it's all a setup." Well, yeah, it was a setup. That's the whole point. And the other thing is, he goes, "Oh, it didn't really happen. It wasn't me. I was tucking in my shirt." Yeah, over and over again, right? Like,
Well,
I don't know. I mean, how people, they must think people are stupid if they expect us to fall for shit like that.
Well, especially like, okay, I'm a big, gigantic, fat dude. You know, you've met me. And I've never had to lay down on a bed to tuck my shirt in, ever.
Do you ever tuck your shirt down past your balls, either?
Never. I certainly don't. Yeah, I definitely don't tuck my shirt under my balls.
Shirt tucking technique here. Do you ever like spend a lot of time on the front part right here, just like repeatedly
I do.
Your shirt?
Sometimes hours.
I think I need to tuck my shirt in right now. No, no. The thing is, like Rudy Giuliani has literally zero credibility anymore, right? I mean, he's a fucking laughing stock.
If he was divorced for the third time, his wife would divorce him. To me, if I was married to someone and I saw that's divorceable right there.
So, okay, and the whole laptop thing. I want to make sure I understand what this whole scandal with the laptop is about.
Okay.
So, Hunter Biden, who lives in LA, he lives in California, boards an airplane with 3 laptops, flies across the country to Delaware, and drops them off at a repair shop while completely intoxicated, and drives away, and then forgets that he dropped off his computers.
The laptops that have all of the damning information that would bring down this huge conspiracy, right? And he put stickers on them. Stickers from his dead brother's charity in order to say, yes, this belongs to the Biden family, because where else would these stickers from that charity come from?
Nobody else would have those stickers. They exist only in one place.
What gets me about that too is like, okay, just pretend for a second that laptop is real. It probably isn't, but just pretend it is. He got that information illegally, so it's fruit of the poison tree. It's inadmissible.
Yeah, I'm waiting for somebody to really like to do something about that, to arrest that guy, because yeah, he broke the law. I mean, they keep talking about, there's all of these emails. Yeah. Even if it's valid, even if they're valid, he broke the law.
So the repair place, do we even know what repair place it is? Because I'm never taking anything of mine to that repair place ever again.
Well, the guy's also legally
on my hard drive. I just want them to fix it. I don't want them looking at like what sort of emails I had back and forth with people. And so, like, of course, we can't have the identity of the repair shop, because that would hurt their business. Of course.
And so it should.
The guy's also legally blind. I think when you're working on computers, and I could be wrong, but I think vision is an integral part of working on computers. I
personally put about as much stock in the whole Hunter Biden laptop story as I do in the story that Jeffrey Epstein hung himself.
Well, here's the other thing about it too, is that, okay, I don't want to hear from the guy whose daughter and son-in-law are on the federal payroll about any sort of about nepotism and influence peddling. His daughter got a contract with China, got fast track approval for her sales of her clothes because of her association with her father. So it's like, okay, so my thing is just like I said before about racist, the people who tried to make the case that Joe Biden was racist. If Joe Biden is racist, so is Trump. So then therefore that's no longer a criterion for measurement. So if they both influence peddled, all right, then that's for me no longer a criterion because they both did it. So I can't use that as a differentiator.
And with the New York Times saying that Trump had a bank account in China that he didn't disclose, and it had millions of dollars traveling through it, seems like once again we have a case of projection. He's the one taking money from China, but he's going to blame Joe Biden for taking money from China.
Well, I mean, that's what he does all the time, though. I mean, he's a projection machine. So anything that he's afraid somebody might find out about him, he's going to accuse them of it first.
Right.
And he's gonna get the stink all over them. Whether they're guilty or not is irrelevant. He can blame them. So when his secret comes out, it's less of a big deal because it's already happened to somebody else. It's kind of the way that works.
Right.
So saying, "Oh, Joe Biden did this," whether or not it's true, people go, "Ah!" And then the Trump news comes out, and it's like, "Oh, this story again. We've already sat through this movie."
Right. You know,
Let's just play a hypothetical game for a second, right? Let's just say that the election goes off and Biden wins, right? And he gets sworn in, and everything is more or less status quo as we had come to expect it before Trump, right? Biden has already said that he's not going to instruct one way or another the Justice Department to investigate Trump for crimes as president. Do you think he should? Or do you think the Justice Department should?
I think the Justice Department should. He should never instruct them to do it. They should just do it on their own.
right.
He should hands off.
Right. He should be standing up.
That's the proper role of the president. He should not have a hand.
Right.
But yes, I think they should.
Real quick though about the legally blindness. Now I just looked it up because I was pretty sure, but I wanted to make sure I was correct. You're legally blind if your vision is 2,200 or less in one eye. Technically speaking, I'm legally blind. I'm 2,300 in one and 2,400 in the other. So
you're giving personal testimony that he could operate. Okay.
Yeah, because I'm correctable. Now some people may be non-correctable, in which case then I'd question their ability to do it. But yeah, so I'm technically legally blind.
How thick is that glass?
Napalm is worse than legally blind. Napalm is almost completely blind. Last I heard.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a squint like this to see the screen.
Well, and that's one thing that's been worried me a little bit lately is that my eyesight's definitely gotten noticeably worse in the last few months, and I worry about that as actually being a symptom of the diabetes, damage to because that can cause macular degeneration and all sorts of stuff with your eyes.
Too.
What's that?
It can cause glaucoma too.
Right. So that's something that does concern me a bit. Of course, I had the same glasses for the last 6 years, 8 years, 6 years. So.
I wanted to say, since Brian Johnson is in the chat, I wanted to say that I saw AC/DC's new video. I saw it today, and dude, excellent job.
That's funny.
I saw a different video that I was not happy with. It was from Five Finger Death Punch. And in it, there were people who were wearing masks who were given pins that basically called them compliant, and they had hammer and sickle on the pins. There's symbolism to that. And then the overlord type people were given pins that said exempt. And there's kind of a message that they're putting out with this video. And then they went edgy. They went for the people who think that masks are a sign of you're a communist. They went for that message, and then when they found out that people didn't like the message, they started backing away from the message, saying, "Oh, it's just a fictitious video. It's a fiction. It's not our actual beliefs." But it's a pretty bad video.
So wait, who is this? Five flavored fruit punch.
5 Finger Death Punch.
Five flavored fruit punch.
Yeah, I've never been a big fan of them. But yeah, well, and the thing is, it's cowardly on their part because basically it's like they put out their political views, and then when that wasn't accepted, then they're like, oh no, we were just that wasn't our view. We just put that out there because I'm always putting out things that I don't believe to on my work, so people will think I believe something I don't. I may not always do a good job of describing what I believe, but I definitely don't put the opposite on purpose.
Badger has a question. He says, here's a question for the panel. At the end of his first term, how presidential has Trump become compared to the day that he took office? And would you expect any improvements in this regard if he
I would
gets the
say
second?
he's worse than he was when he started, and I expect him to get far worse if he gets reelected, because he will feel then a sense of mandate. He'll feel a sense of vindication, that the country has vindicated him and reelected him. So all the stuff where he's been flirting with autocracy, I think that just pales in comparison to what he'll do.
Yeah, I mean, if Trump is reelected, I mean, remember how he was after the Senate failed to convict him of impeachment, right? And he was basically gleeful and definitely emboldened by that. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, things have happened this year that I never thought I would see the day, like the post office stuff this summer, which continues, by the way, to this day. And, armed soldier police in the streets. And so, I mean, the 2020 has been a hell of a ride, right? And I can't wait for this fucking year to end. But I mean, if Trump actually does get voted out, there's still going to be conflict. It doesn't really matter who wins. There's going to be, unfortunately, if
he doesn't get voted out and he loses the plurality again, if he loses the popular vote, but still gets the electoral college, we're still going to take the Senate. The left is going to take the Senate, and then we'll have all the votes that it takes to convict him with an impeachment and do a removal.
I have a couple of things. Yeah, that's true. I was talking to my sister today, and like last time I think I was here, I said that my father had registered. He's 75 years old. He registered to vote for the first time, so he could vote for me. And I was talking to my sister, and she's 2 years younger than me, and she also never voted before, and she registered to vote so she could vote for me. And she was saying that she doesn't really believe in voting. She says it doesn't matter who you vote for, that whatever's going to happen is going to happen anyway. And I said, I strongly disagree with that. And she said, well, let's take Trump. Said, if he loses, there's going to be violence. If he wins, there's going to be violence. You don't have any control over that. You have no power over that, so why get involved? She said, the only reason why I bothered to vote this time was so I could vote for you. And to an extent, in this particular situation, she's right. Almost no matter what happens, there's bound to be violence. And there's nothing any of us can do about it.
True. Although I think that the violence will, if Trump wins, the violence will be worse because it'll be backed up by the state.
Yeah.
I think if Trump wins, I think the rioting will increase by a tenfold, because there's going to be a lot of people just pissed off that they're going to feel that this democracy isn't working. And then I think Trump, as a response, will push an authoritarian government and use the government to use unreasonable force against the
violence
rioters.
During the actual day of the election. I mean, will there be violence at the polls?
Probably.
Yeah.
To Badger's question about the chances of a King Trump. Now, well, certainly, like I said, I think he will go as authoritarian as he can get away with in the next term. So probably yes. Now, the one saving grace, and this is something that this is a line straight from the great dictator, and I think I said it last week. As long as men die, liberty will never perish. And that's the thing. He's 74. He's not in good shape. So even
I don't even think we would have to wait for old age. I think if he were to win re-election and try to get pretty authoritarian, I think he'd be taken out. I think at that point it would kind of become, if we got to blow up the entire White House, that's what we'll do. I really think that's the stance a lot of people would take. I have a hard time believing him surviving a second term one way or the other. I also have a hard time believing that Joe Biden will survive a term, but that's different reasons, though.
Oh yeah. No, I think. Well, in fact, I suspect he might cash out around 80. here's the other possibility. I don't say it's impossible that if Biden does become infirm, because I mean I know all the attempts of Trump to try to say he's infirm now are all bullshit. But it's look, he's 78. You know, he'll be 82 if he makes it to the end of his term. I think that there may come a point where he resigns just for health reasons.
What I'm afraid of is that the second largest protests I've seen in Denver were the days after Trump got elected. The first largest was actually the We Are Women march, right? Second largest was Trump won. If he were to win again, I do believe, like Devshell said, that it would be 10 times bigger, the protest. But I think they're going to just eschew the whole, like, going around downtown where there's businesses. They're going to go into the residential areas. They're going to be too big to be held by just the downtown areas. They're going to start really wanting people to know how sad they are. Because they've done the protests downtown.
Hang on a second.
The BLM marches downtown, and no changes happened.
I want to respond to
going into this.
I want to respond to this Yahoo. Ridiculous comments from a candidate. It's a ridiculous comment to believe that people who love our country would fight back against a authoritarian who tried to do away with our government. That's ridiculous. You don't think that if Trump tries to become a dictator and basically outlaws the government, you don't think people would fight back? You don't think that they would go as far as to blow up buildings? Then you are the one that's insane, my friend.
And I would say to Tommy,
I'm sorry if I have to make an academic point, and I'm not really meaning to take issue with you, Rob, directly, but if Trump becomes a dictator is being far too generous. We've already passed that point a long time ago, whether it's the kids in cages or whether it's telling all of his officials not to obey subpoenas, for fuck's sake. Subpoenas it means under penalty, right, of law. There's no penalty.
But we still have a functioning House of Representatives and a functioning Senate. And the only reason why the Senate hasn't acted is because it's his party. Like Michael said, if we win the Senate in this election, there's power there to do something, to remove him, to stop him, to do all kinds of stuff. Right. If somehow he manages to win re-election and removes all the power from the Senate, kind of like the Emperor on Star Wars, at that point he would be an actual dictator, not just acting like it.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
At that point, absolutely, there would be armed people marching on Washington with homemade tanks and all other kinds of shit.
And to be fair, and also to Rob's point, I mean, literally, if that happened, if he literally wiped away the Congress, then actually I would hope people would, because that's literally when they're supposed to. And I don't think Biden's going to resign in the first 100 days. I think unless he gets sick, I think it probably won't happen until 2 years in. But I think somewhere around his 80th birthday, he probably will.
So you think you agree, Joe, basically with the premise that if you're voting for Biden, you're also effectively voting for Kamala Harris for president.
Basically, yeah.
Right.
I think you should look at every presidential candidate that way.
Well, you should definitely take seriously that it could be the vice president could become president. Yeah, damn right.
And that's what
Dan Quayle was vice president.
Well, and that's really what hurt John McCain, because people respected John McCain, but they looked at her and go, "Oh my God, if he dies, something happens to him. That's who we're stuck with. No way, no fucking way."
She actually got way more traction than was comfortable for me. I was freaking out. Roundabout sort of 2010, she still was really popular and amongst the right-hand side of the equation. I'm just like, why? She really,
because they found her attractive, which is so shallow and ridiculous. I think it's hilarious. It wasn't her views. It was just like, oh, look at her, she's so cute.
She's telegenic, right?
Yeah. Exiled is saying in the chat that she wants my chair. I just want her to know that they only make chairs this overstuffed in America.
Well, yeah, but you know what though? in Britain, they have an Empress style bed that's bigger than a king size, and we can't get it here. And I want that because, you know, I mean, there's me and Suzanne and, well, 2 dogs now. There was 3. I could use more space in the bed.
We've got a California king downstairs.
Yeah, but the California king is the same as a regular king, just oriented differently.
I thought it was a little taller. I thought it was just a little bit longer.
It's a little narrower and a little longer. So you basically have roughly the same amount of surface area, just oriented differently. But I want something that's actually like longer and wider, because I mean, a standard king size, as big as they are, my feet stick off the end of the bed if I don't scrunch up. And you know, I'm wide. I take up a lot of space, and you throw some dogs into the mix. Even little dogs, you know, it still takes up space. The Empress is like 8 feet by 8 feet. I love an 8 feet by 8 feet bed.
Brian and Exile, they've both slept in this room where this chair is. This chair replaced the bed that they slept in.
Oh, wow. Yeah, when they were here, I didn't get a chance. Like, our schedules just got screwed up, and we didn't get a chance to see each other. So, and actually, I think I was actually supposed to come out to where you guys were, but then I had to bail. I did meet Brian though in London with actually when I met Paul.
I'm supposed to be going to the UK for about a month at the end of this year. And that's going to be like the most risky behavior I've engaged in since I came to the US from the UK in end of June. And when I get there, we have to quarantine for 2 weeks. So even though we're only going to be there for a month, we have to waste 2 weeks of it in a hotel room.
Michael, you didn't really need that info. You didn't need that info, did you?
Yeah, pop that up there, Paul.
What? I missed something.
No, in the chat. Bring forward what Exile
She
said.
said that they did more than sleep when they were sleeping in my house.
Yeah, you didn't need that info, did you?
No. He's just sleeping on that same bed. It just moved in the other room.
Bow chicka bow wow.
Ew.
That's funny. Hey, that's good. Hey, as long as anytime someone's getting it, it's a good thing.
I was waiting for Paul to stop so I can jump in with that, so I can, you know, say, "Hey, Michael, look!" But then I saw your face. I saw your jaw drop. I was like, "Oh, he saw it already." Shit.
Right. So, Kazoom, I watched your video earlier where you were saying that you thought and Michael, you mentioned as well that you thought Trump might win the electoral, even if he loses again the popular vote. And I think we're all shell shocked from 2016 and realize just how possible something like that is and how easy it is to basically steal an election if you can do that. But with all the people early voting this year, like I say, you can't take it for granted that they're all not voting for Trump. But I looking at the lines, I mean, I don't know. It's looking pretty favorable to me.
In fact, I actually think that, in the same way that, people said that the polls were wrong last time, but they actually weren't. Hillary got it exactly. I actually think this time the polls are wrong, but in the other way. The reason why is because when they do weighted polls, they don't count, like they weight each demographic based on what they typically vote for. And in this instance,
Voters.
Yeah, young voters. We're seeing young voters are way more represented this time than they were last time, and we know that again. In general, statistically speaking, they vote more to the left than they vote to the right. So I'm thinking that we could end up seeing some upsets in certain places, some of the races. Simply because they'll have the polls will have underrated younger people, and that's the thing. Normally, I'm like. You know me. I'm like, don't even fucking count them because they never show up. But they're actually showing. The numbers are saying they're actually showing up. So, I'll take back everything. Well, I will take back, but I'll stop saying it.
No, I mean, my son, Devin. A lot of his friends. I kind of stumbled on a thread on Facebook where a lot of his friends were like, "Dude, is your father running for something?" And he's like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Oh, because I voted for him. I thought that was your dad." And I saw there was a whole bunch of it. So yeah, the kids are voting.
Yeah. Yeah, so if the kids actually show up better, just equal to the rest of the population, like because last time, 55% of the people voted, only 35% of the young people. But if you take out the young people out of that, that means 60% of the overall population voted. Not counting the young people. So even if they were to vote in a 50 to 55% range, that would be a massive shift to the left.
Well, if the early voting trend continues unabated in the basic trajectory, by election day, we'll have something like 165 to 170 million votes,
right,
which is unheard of for the United States. Really.
Right, which is about 40 million votes more than last time.
Right. So, whoever those 40 million people are, they must be pretty fucking motivated, right? And that's why I personally have a really good feeling about it.
Yeah, me too. I think, and basically, for me, what I'm going to be watching for, not so much on election night, because as we said, a lot of votes aren't going to be counted until after election day. But the states to watch. I mean, if Trump loses Florida, it's done.
Right. And we'll find out about Florida on election day because they start counting their early ballots already. They've already started counting their early ballots, just like here in Colorado.
And it's their
2 weeks before the election, so we're already counting ballots returned here in Colorado as well. Right. I didn't know some states did that. I just found that out the other day.
New Jersey starts 10 days before the election.
10 days before. Since the fiasco with Bush and Gore, Florida has gotten their shit together when it comes to elections. They're actually gotten pretty good at it.
Yeah. So that's the thing. So I mean, if Florida, so that's the thing. Basically, if Florida gets called for Biden that night, I will sleep easily because again, of the three of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, Biden's going to win. All the indication are he's going to win Michigan handily. So if he wins that and he wins Florida, it doesn't really matter what the others do. I mean, I want this to be a crushing defeat. I want this to be a humiliating defeat for Trump, because if anything that can tamp down, his people, his more ardent followers, will be a total repudiation of Trumpism.
I think if Trump loses, they need to either impeach him or 25th Amendment him or whatever as soon as possible after election day, because the sort of dark horse, lame duck period, whatever you want to call it, between him losing the election and Joe Biden being inaugurated, he's basically do whatever. Yeah, right. Yeah, Michael's pointing out that's what his name means. And this is the true thing, though. I mean, it's scary enough contemplating what he's going to do in the next 10 days just to try to improve his chances. I don't put anything past the man, and I know that's my bias, but bottom line is, when he's a lame duck president, he's got nothing to lose by screwing it up for Joe. Right.
Well, and there's already talk of those plans in the works for basically just sandbagging the new administration with now to Tommy's credit. Now, Tommy, I think that Trump probably will win Texas. I think it'll be closer than anyone expected, but I think ultimately he'll win Texas, and he'll most likely win Ohio. I'm not thinking he's going to win Florida. I mean, basically the way that the trends have gone is that Florida has been pretty, the most favorable polls to Trump show Florida even, and most of them show him losing badly.
Tommy, I will take that bet. I will bet you respect. I will bet you your respect in me versus my respect in you that Trump will lose at least one of those three states you've just put there, if not more than one. But I'll bet you for sure. I'll bet you internet respect. All right. How's that? In other words, I want to see a tweet from you bigging me up, bravo.
So that Johnson was a spoiler in the last election. Well, so was Jill Stein.
Yeah.
If you're talking about third-party candidates being spoilers, and Howie Hawkins does not have as many liberals backing him as Jill Stein did.
Right. Well, it's a thing. I mean, I think, if anyone was a spoiler, because if anything, the people who vote for Johnson would have been more likely to vote Republican anyway. So yeah, I think that, but we know that in those three states, the votes for Jill Stein were more than the what Hillary lost by in those states.
Yeah. Now, election night, I will be at a election night party, socially distanced and masked, outdoors apparently, in a tent, location to be determined. But my race won't be decided probably for about 2 weeks after the election. But that's all right. I'm going to a party anyway, damn it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I think I might just, for the next week's Breakfast Club on Halloween night and Joe's birthday, I might just make my face into, I might just paint my face into a scared voter, you know, just paint some kind of scared, like, makeup expression on my face. I don't know what to be. I'm running out of ideas, guys, to be honest.
I have an idea for me.
What's your idea, Michael?
Oh, I got to save it for next week. But there's a reason why I didn't cut my hair for the last 3 weeks when I know I need a haircut. And it's for the costume. November 1st, I'm getting a haircut.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of.
Is it the Pepe clown
God.
or something?
I wish I still had my members only shirt from the 80s. It was this black button down shirt, and what I used to do for Halloween is I would get a piece of cardboard backing from some t-shirts or something like that, or dress shirts, and I would cut a strip, and one side is gray, but the other side is white, and I would put it, and I would take my collar and fold it down and staple it, and I looked just like, a priest with, at the time, the way a lot of priests would not so much a Catholic, but some of the other ministers would dress. And I was at a party once. It was a Halloween party, and I'm sitting there, and this girl said, fuck this or fuck that. And then she saw me, and she freaked out. She was like, oh, she thought she actually cursed in front of a priest, and she was very upset. So I told her, yeah, Church of the Divine Hops, as I had 4 beers in my hands.
You're muted again. You need to unmute. Unmute.
You're muted.
Push the button. Unmute it. There
you go.
My apologies. I think it's time for me to wrap up the show. Is what I was trying to say. I'm starting to flag. I had a very painful dentist appointment yesterday, which gave me a lot of painkillers, and so today I'm a bit sort of like flagging. Anyway,
I just got comfortable with snacks and stuff.
Hey,
I just got comfortable with snacks and everything. Where are you going?
Yeah, guilt doesn't really work on me.
Your mind tricks don't work on me.
Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, I want to thank everybody in the chat, and those of you who watch but choose not to chat, thank you for watching the show this evening. And of course, to my compadres here, thank you for being my faithful crew. And I will see you in the after show. And in the meantime, we'll be here next week for our Halloween extravaganza, where I expect we'll have at least 1 or 2 of the ladies as well to join us.